and gentlemen, good morning. I'm Mary Papazian, president of San Jose State University, and it is my privilege and pleasure to welcome you to the Hanmer Theater Center. I also want to say good morning to those of you who've joined us remotely in our Diaz-Compian Student Union or who are viewing on our live web stream. I regret that we couldn't fit all of you inside of the theater, but I'm glad that technology allows you to participate nonetheless. We are here for what I'm certain will be a captivating, informative conversation about sports and social activism. I suspect you'd agree with me that the theme of our morning, from words to action, is both timely and relevant. And I'm grateful to the luminaries from professional and amateur sports, journalism, and social action for lending their voices and disparate perspectives to our conversation. You'll meet them in a bit, and I can't wait to hear what they have to say. And this is just the start of the conversation, because we also are here today to celebrate the birth of an institute at San Jose State University for the study of sports, society, and social change. That too is both timely and relevant. And there's no question that San Jose State is the ideal home for the institute. You need only glance at today's program or the banners adorning the theater or stroll our campus to understand why. We are proud of the many Spartans who have used their careers in sport as platforms for change. Dr. Harry Edwards, who will moderate our second panel, has been at the epicenter of sports and social change for, dare I say it, a half century. Sorry, Harry. Many of you know about his long association with the San Francisco 49ers or his esteemed academic career at the University of California at Berkeley. But today, I want to be sure that you also know that Dr. Edwards began his educational journey as an undergraduate here at San Jose State. Harry is a Spartan, and we are proud to launch an institute that reflects the focus of his life's work at his alma mater. The institute truly will bear his heart and his soul, and it will be enriched by his vision and intellect, along with the San Jose State University faculty members and many others who will inform its development. Dr. Edwards inspired and led the Olympic Project for Human Rights. He has profoundly influenced the lives of many athletes and other leaders from the world of sport. That includes many Spartans, including Coach Bill Walsh and track and field legends John Carlos and Tommy Smith. I had the pleasure of spending time with Harry, John, and Tommy last August when we gathered to announce the return of men's track and field to San Jose State in 2018. That announcement took place in front of the campus sculpture that commemorates the 1968 Mexico City Olympic medal stand protest that provoked global outcry, forever changed John and Tommy's lives, and influenced countless others. John could not be with us here today, but we are grateful that Tommy has joined us. Activism and sport have long been deeply intertwined. Today's panel discussions will bring both historical and contemporary perspectives, and our institute will provide a framework and structure that enables and empowers voices from diverse points of view to continue the dialogue. The institute also will be a home to educational offerings that may include degree completion programs for athletes. It will facilitate research and community programming like today's. Athletic excellence is part of San Jose State's legacy. Striving for social change through informed, principled activism is embedded in our institutional DNA. But these values do not exist in isolation. They inform our mission. They inspire our efforts to serve so many students from historically marginalized communities. And they help explain why a recently released social mobility index named San Jose State one of America's top 10 universities, empowering the upward mobility of its students. I am very excited about today's program. Thank you, and grateful that so many of you have joined us. On behalf of our university and broader community, welcome to San Jose. And now it's my great pleasure to introduce an important partner. The Ross Initiative in Sports for Equality, known as RISE, is engaged in forward-looking, meaningful social change through sport. We are fortunate to have with us its CEO to preview a report that will be delivered at the Super Bowl. Please join me in welcoming Jocelyn Benson.
Thank you, and thank you all for being here today for this important conversation. RISE is an entity that is comprised of a collaboration of every sports league and sports media network in the country. Our board consists of every commissioner of every league and the heads of every major sports network. And we come together to harness the unifying power of sports to improve race relations in our country. And so we're a proud partner with the Institute here at San Jose State University. And I'm proud today to give you a preview of a report we're going to present next week at a town hall just before the Super Bowl in Houston, Texas. Of course, we saw a number of things this past fall in the NFL season, where athletes ranging from, of course, 49ers quarterback Colin Kaepernick to the Seattle Seahawks to the Miami Dolphins and several others on and off the field in the NFL, in the NBA, reaching out and speaking up to promote better race relations and raise awareness about several of the injustices and many issues plaguing all of us today who seek justice. So at the Ross Initiative in Sports for Equality, we came together and studied and analyzed all of the incidents of activism over the past 6 months to provide a path moving forward, recognizing that to create a sustainable movement in this space, we need to ensure that the activism is impactful and that we're creating real change. We also believe at the Ross Initiative in Sports for Equality, or RISE, that sports brings people together, and through that, athletes can bring people together that may sit on opposite sides of a spectrum or perspectives. And through bringing people together, they can promote positive change and real solutions. So at RISE, we worked around the country this past season to, as all of these actions were happening, use athletes and work with athletes to empower them, amplify their voices, and bring people together from various different perspectives so that we can get in one room, have a conversation, and create solutions. We had town halls in Miami, in New York, and in other parts of the country, Michigan, and Jacksonville, to bring people together to foster solutions moving forward. So today I want to present to you a brief update on what we found and what we found works for athletes in this space, but also offer some recommendations moving forward. And again, next week we'll be offering many more details. Our vision at RISE is to create a space where athletes are empowered to be leaders in social change. We do primarily two different things. One, we work to engage athletes in effective social change, but we also engage in education and leadership programs for student athletes around the country. And I'm pleased to announce today that we'll be expanding both of these efforts, particularly our education programs, here to the Bay Area this year. We're very excited. We'll be opening an office in the Bay Area, and we'll be partnering with local sports teams and schools like here at San Jose State University to ensure that we are doing everything we can, not just to empower our current professional athletes to be voices and effective voices for social change, but also to work with the athletes of tomorrow, student athletes at the high school level and the collegiate level. We have a 10-week curriculum that takes the student athlete through learning about how to amplify their voice in improving race relations, while also instilling valuable leadership skills in those athletes. We all know that athletes are leaders in their community. We want to empower and inspire them to use that leadership role to promote social change. And that's where our education and leadership programs develop, and we're excited to be expanding them now to the Bay Area. What we found this past season is that there were essentially 6 themes of activism in the NFL, in the NBA, and other parts of our sports industry. And so our report divides those themes into 6 areas and analyzes the effectiveness of each. They range from protest, actions that intentionally violate, you could say, conventions to raise awareness about particular issues, public statements made in support of others engaged in protest and others engaged in activism, wearing special apparel, like the NFL in Week 13 had Cleats Week, and as we'll be talking about soon, some other NBA players followed suit to wear apparel that brought attention to social justice issues. We also saw collective action, actions demonstrating a sense of unity and solidarity to support social justice causes, athletes getting into the community, working together as a team, linking arms on the court to show collaboration and collective action as opposed to any individual action. We also saw athletes engaging stakeholders, involving them in social justice work with an express goal of bringing about sustained change. An example of this would be the Seattle Seahawks, who worked throughout the season to engage with policymakers and law enforcement and elected officials to develop ways that they could be a part of sustainable change. And then finally, financial contributions. We saw players and organizations making financial gifts to support institutions that were and have a history of working on social justice in this space. So our report details several examples. We found hundreds in just this past 6 months of all 6 of these areas. But what we also talk about is not just the work of professional athletes and organizations in this space. We also go through not just collegiate athletes who did many of these things, but high school and even middle school athletes, student athletes, who engaged in protest, who engaged in collective action, who wore special apparel, and other things. And we found not just that there's this inspirational new younger generation that were fearless in speaking out to draw attention to issues that mattered to them. What we also found is as you go down the spectrum, the need for support for these young athletes is greater as you go down and as you go younger and younger. And for example, we're going to be honoring a group of young athletes just at our town hall before the Super Bowl next week that engaged in collective action and in protest and saw some negative results. So we'll be talking about that more and honoring them for their courageous action. And these were middle school kids on the middle school football team who saw their heroes doing things and wanted to do something as well. And I can say as RISE has gone throughout the country over the past several months, talking to athletes, talking with young kids, documenting everything that was happening, we found that there's a significant energy right now, and perhaps now this January it's only growing, to seek social change and use the platform that sports create to have impactful social change occur. But what we also saw is a specific need to reach out to younger student athletes to make sure they have the support and information and resources they need to explore the use of their voices in this work. So our report goes through many of these examples that we analyzed and talks about what was most, and we found that interestingly, collective action engaged the most athletes across the country, and we go into some details on that. But it also ends with recommendations, which is what I wanted to emphasize here today for all of you and for the Institute here to think about. With regards to our recommendations for how do we take what occurred these past 6 months and move them into sustainable change and action. The number one thing that we saw in talking with athletes and working with people around the country is the need for more information and education. Athletes want to be educated on the issues before speaking out. Others want to be educated on what tactics work best to seek the impact that they're trying to have. And everyone wanted to learn about history, wanted to learn about the history of other athletes in the space, what they did, connect with mentors, and learn from them. So providing that space for education for the athletes who want to be engaged in activism on various fronts was the most number one need that we saw moving forward, that institutes like the institute here at San Jose can provide. Our second recommendation is the need for a support network. I already mentioned the impact that this activism can have on young student athletes seeking to make change. So ensuring that there is a support network for athletes at any level who want to speak out so that they're not alone, that they know that they're standing on the shoulders of those who've come before them and they're inspiring those moving forward. And one of the ways in which you can build a support network, of course, is creating mentors. So we're encouraging professional athletes and even collegiate athletes to serve as mentors to those who have less experience in this space to help build that network of support. Next, we found internally, when you have teams or organizations working with athletes who want to speak out, or if you have organizations themselves who want to be a part of advocating for change, they need to be proactive in creating a space for discussion, perspective sharing, and solution building. There were many teams, particularly in the NFL, that had division on their teams in terms of some players wanting to speak out and others having different perspectives. So it's critical that teams internally provide that space to allow players and athletes to share their perspectives and come to a common understanding with the recognition that athletes do bring people together and can promote solutions. Our fourth recommendation is from an external standpoint. Externally, outside of the team space, we need to create opportunities for collaboration, information sharing, training, and strategic development so that no one team or no one athlete is out there on their own, but they're part of a broader network and engaged in a strategy moving forward with clear goals to measure impact. We felt building this type of infrastructure for collaboration and perspective sharing among athletes and others in the industry who seek social change is critical to ensure that as individuals, athletes are coming together to drive a sustainable impact, recognizing that without that demonstrable impact, we may lose the energy of activism moving forward. In addition, engaging in community leaders and beyond. Too often the sports industry can be a silo, and teams within that and leagues within that can be silos. So we felt it was important for to break down those walls, for leagues to work together, for teams to work together, and for the sports industries to connect with social justice organizations, political leaders, community activists outside of the sports world to amplify what each other is doing and inform what we all are doing together. So working proactively to connect and engage community leaders and others is going to be a critical component of activism moving forward. And finally, the move of protest to action will be driven by ongoing study of the impact. We found and we believe to ensure that activism is sustainable and that athletes are supported, there has to be an ongoing work to study the impact in real time of the actions that different athletes, teams, and others are taking so that we can grow organically as a movement and evaluate as we go, interacting with other current events, how to be most impactful at a particular moment. And all of that feeds into, we believe, building an infrastructure that allows for those conversations to occur. So we were very hopeful after evaluating the actions of the season, and we're even more hopeful going forward, but we believe strongly that these are the types of things that we as an industry and we as a community, nationally and locally, need to create moving forward if we're going to see sustained, impactful activism that leads to real change in this space. So that's a preview of our report that will be issued in more detail in the Super Bowl. Next week, it will be released on Friday, February 3rd at our town hall in Houston. If any of you are in Houston, please come by. We'll be having several athletes who are engaged in activism this season talking about their work, and it will be a very inspiring conversation. But on top of that, we'll be releasing in detail this report this day online. So even if you can't be in Houston, do check out our website at risetowin.org, and you can read the full report there next Friday and also watch the stream of the town hall. So with that, thank you to San Jose State University for providing us with this opportunity to preview our report. But we're also here today because one of the athletes that we have worked with extensively over the past several months, Draymond Green of the Golden State Warriors, who could not be here today, had a message to share with all of us as he works to be a part of what we're doing here at San Jose.
Moving on with my life from Michigan State to the pros, or, you're around so many different people, so everyone's background isn't the same. That doesn't mean that you can't be a good teammate. When I first got to Michigan State, if you weren't from where I'm from or somewhere like where I'm from, I don't really know if I could be around you. But seeing how diverse it was and having them putting us in position to accept that diversity and also learn how to be an important part of that diversity. It really taught me how to be a part of an NBA team. Skin color doesn't matter. Nationality doesn't matter. Everything is just together. It's one. Hi, I'm Draymond Green, forward for the Golden State Warriors. First off, I want to say thank you for allowing me to be a part of the town hall. I wish I could be there, but I'm thankful to be a part in this video. I support Rise because I think everyone should have a voice. No matter race, no matter gender, whatever it is, you should have a voice, and I stand against racism. Wanted to thank Dr. Harry Edwards for all his work that he does and continuing to spread equality. I am a huge supporter of that. And once again, just wanted to say thank you for all your efforts.
Thank you, Draymond. Now, Draymond, as he said, couldn't be here today, but he did want to make an investment and contribution to the Institute here. And so he is donating his game-worn shoes. These were worn on the December 3rd game against the Phoenix Suns. They were specially designed shoes highlighting his commitment to our work at Rise and our work collectively to sideline racism and be a voice for positive change. And so I'd like to, on behalf of Draymond, make a contribution to San Jose State University today by presenting these shoes to President Papazian. These shoes will become part of the Dr. Edwards collection here at San Jose State University, and we're proud to make this contribution also as a illustrative of our commitment to working with you and being a part of this institute moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you, thank you. They're very big, but they need to be big because they represent the first step in our collective journey from words to action. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Madam President, for your leadership as well. With that, I would like to bring on our first panel, which I am proud to be able to moderate. We have with us today, as you know, a number of esteemed leaders in sports and in sports media to talk more about this connection of sports, the media, and activism today. And as we know, the sports media is constantly engaged in a balancing act between two equally legitimate roles. First, that of fulfilling the obligations of sports journalism and reporting upon sports organizations, sports personalities, athletes, and their activities and outcomes. But second, the media act as a vital marketing and promotions partner to the sports enterprise, providing daily information, images, and storylines critical to securing fan allegiance, affiliation, and continuing fiscal support. Activist politics carried out within this space often creates challenges where the journalistic demands of covering the story potentially undermine the marketing and promotions and branding functions between sports organization and the sports media. Some media try to ignore such activism, and on other occasions, the media creates storylines that can either legitimize or delegitimize protests in the arena. We work to ensure, and those joining me on this panel will work to ensure, that there are instances where media can amplify the athletes' voices. And what we're going to talk about today with this first panel is how do we work together to ensure that the stories that these athletes are trying to bring forward, the work that they're doing, is accurately transposed in the media and in our broader societal space. So our first panel is uniquely qualified to discuss these challenges of media relations and sports activism, particularly in the age of internet and social media. So with that, please join me in welcoming our first panel. Thank you. We have Kevin Merida, who is the editor-in-chief of ESPN's The Undefeated, one of the, if not the leading voice in this space on sports journalism promoting social change. We have Danielle Slayton, the Olympic silver medalist for soccer, and of course Tommy Smith, Olympic gold medalist for track and field. Ann Killian, who's a sports journalist with the San Francisco Chronicle, and finally Mark Spears, senior NBA writer with ESPN's The Undefeated. Thank you all for joining us today. So I wanted to open our discussion today by offering each of you the opportunity to comment on the past 6 months in sports. Not just about the NFL season and Colin Kaepernick, of course that's a part of it, but of course race in sports was, as it always is, part of the narrative for most of 2016. You had the Olympics, of course, you had several actions within the NBA and NBA players. So I was wondering, and Kevin, we'll start with you, if you could kind of help place this activism that we saw this past year in the context of activism historically. Where does it fall? Was it a spike in activism? Were we just paying more attention this year? What is the context in which we should understand not just Colin Kaepernick and some of the activism we saw in the NFL, but across the industry this year? How does that fit in the historical trajectory of sports?
Wow, that's a lot. I mean, and I'm going to be intimidated by that question because Tommy Smith's right here. And, you know, I always remember that black glove salute. So, you know, I've said, I think, and maybe it's just a prediction, that we're kind of in a renaissance. I do feel that athletes now are more and more, they're looking around and want to use their influence to affect change. They're figuring it out, and it's not only in things like taking a knee, but it's using their voice on their own platforms, whether that's Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. They want to participate, and they seem less afraid. And this is some of the most prominent athletes, and that extends to the NBA. We saw what happened at the ESPY Awards. Those athletes asked to have that time to make a statement. We, at the Undefeated, held a town hall in Chicago, right on the south side of Chicago, where there's been a lot of gun violence, and a number of athletes, and they wanted to participate. Dwayne Wade was away, and he asked to have more time. And I think there's an awareness that, hey, they can be influential. And so is it the same as the 60s? The times are different, but I think a lot of people are living now and saying a lot of the same things are coursing through society that we haven't dealt with. And that's whether that is violence against young black men, you know, by police, whether that's just inequality, the inability for people to find a way out of their circumstance. I think athletes have a chance to affect that, and I think they're trying to.
And I would say, to add on that, I mean, I think social media and technology really is a game changer in a way that didn't exist in the 1960s. And that is maybe not just the last 6 months that we're talking about, but the evolution of technology, the evolution of the camera phone, the evolution of Twitter, and having that athlete voice that can get directly to the consumer, that can get directly to the public. And it's a new media that I think we're all continuing to figure out as technology evolves, but it's a really, really powerful tool, and it's enabling athletes to have a platform in a way that doesn't have to go through a media channel or a television station necessarily, like it might have in the past.
Man, I feel like a old scab up here. Get up more. Kevin, you mentioned changes, and of course, a plethora of changes. But I want to make one thing clear, all you young folks out there, Ronnie, even you. Ronnie, I was sitting up here, I sure hate to get hit with that head of yours back in the day, but I tell you. The time, 2016, speaking of the change now, that Hussein ran at 1979, almost 50 years ago. It was the same time I ran, 1968, until they changed it to 1983. I don't know what that was about, but they did make a change. The era now that's being changed, I think it's more cranial now than ever before. The athletes are beginning to step out and say, yo, here's me. I mean, what about me? I mean, I'll sit down or I'll stand up or raise a fist or I'll just sit and smile. I think we should take a look at the reality of what is happening and give a chance to the physical or vocal challenges that we hear. Give the people a chance. People I'm talking about is the athletes now. We do have a brain. Some of our brains rattle a bit, but we can still pull it together and make a statement of sorts. We no longer will sit down and scratch our behinds because of itch. We get up and make a noise because there's no other way you're going to be heard unless you physically or mentally make a change. And I'm still making changes. Sometimes I want my cornbread and greens, but I still make that change in doing something that won't cause the other end to make a sound.
Yeah, I think the last 6 months have been really interesting, and I think just given what we saw last Saturday over the weekend, I think that we're going to see a lot more happening. I think people around the country, around the world, understand that it's time to use their voice, and whether that be on social media or and for whatever causes that we feel strongly about, because I think people are understanding that, yes, you could risk your endorsements, yes, you could risk your public profile, but you can't sit by silently. And let's not forget about what the WNBA players did, as well as the other players, or some of the coaches. I mean, I think what Greg Popovich and Steve Kerr said in recent weeks is very powerful and profound, and shows that you don't have to be scared of what you say in front of a microphone, whether it be protesting police brutality or fighting for equal rights if you're a women's soccer player. I mean, there are a lot of issues out there that athletes, I think, are feeling emboldened to take a position on and to use their. And I agree that social media is really a game changer when it comes to all these issues, that you can talk directly to your audience.
And have your voice go out directly, unfiltered.
They had this dinner last night where I was surprised they let me in. They had Dr. Harry Edwards and Jim Brown and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I heard Ronnie Lott walked in, and this is Ronnie Lott, and he says, I'm a little nervous. I think you said you were nervous to talk to Jim Brown or something. And I overheard that. And I was like, wow, what am I here for? But, when I saw that room, when I saw Jim Brown and Dr. Harry Edwards talking, and I saw Kareem talking, it reminded me of the picture of Ali sitting next to Kareem, sitting next to Jim Brown in the 60s. And it made me think, wow, a lot hasn't changed since then. Decades later, we were still, in a lot of ways, in the same place. So I had an opportunity to talk to Kaepernick. I've been around some very vocal warriors, but there's also been some NBA players that have, to me, seem a little bit timid to talk about what's going on. And I don't think, and I'm not going to speak for Kevin, but I don't think the Undefeated couldn't have came out at a better time with what's going on and how we talk about all these social issues. But I think the great thing about it with social media, with our site, is that it's, whether you like it or not, there's a conversation that started and it's out there, and hopefully it'll make people think and change.
Now, what are the challenges and opportunities, particularly for those of you in the media, but also as athletes? What are the challenges and opportunities in this current age to tell the story of these athletes or of others and connecting their story with the broader movement for social change that may be taking hold? What are some of the challenges and opportunities there?
Well, I think it is an opportunity. I mean, the reason I'm in sports writing is not to write about statistics or wins and losses. It's about to tell these stories, and I think this is a really interesting time. And covering Colin Kaepernick on a weekly basis was really fascinating. At times it seemed like he was on an island, and then at other times it seemed like he was really starting a national conversation. It kind of went back and forth, and I think at the end of the day, I mean, there was a lot of blowback for those of us covering it. Like, we don't want to hear about it. We don't mix your politics with our pleasure, as though sports has ever been separate from politics. People wanted to scapegoat him and say that he was causing problems within the team. And then at the end of the season, his teammates voted him the highest honor that the 49ers can give a teammate, the Len Eshpon Award, which I think I hope that other people notice that around the country and say, this was not divisive. This was an opportunity to start a conversation within a group of men and also nationally, and that maybe he'll lose an endorsement over it, but he was rewarded with the respect of his teammates.
I think the opportunity is to understand athletes better, which is what we should strive for in every profession, to understand how they think, how they feel, how their backgrounds and their upbringings inform them, and the kind of athletes they become. And so I think the days of, at least the sports journalism, being just about highlights, and those days are over. That genie is not getting put back in the bottle. And I know that makes it uncomfortable for some sports fans, but I actually think to make sports coverage more well-rounded. I mean, you watch, these great acrobatic catches of what Julio Jones can do, and then you want to know more about him. I do. And so we're finding it, and we're doing a lot of it ourselves with the Undefeated, but I think we also want to give athletes a chance to express themselves in their own words, and that certainly, through first-person pieces, I think athletes are more comfortable doing that, telling their story, and we want to help them tell their stories.
Thank you, sports media. Great, because I remember there was times when I was not supposed to talk. I just do your thing out there, run that 100 meters in 10 flat. Frank, did you ever was 10 flat? and don't
make fun of my dad.
I just realized that when I said it. Oops. That we are a continuous force. And we have more help now than we ever had before. In fact, a few days ago in 1968, the Olympic Games, that was the first time it was shown live. And I think from then on, it became a testimony to the needs, the feeling of the athletes who were competing. Yeah, we do have a say. In fact, we're one of the biggest money-making attitudinal genders that we have in the system now is athletics. Turn on your TV any time of night. Well, there's another program you can also turn on, and you also see it. But I'm not talking about that one. It's the athletic tendencies of this country we call America to move forward, because everybody else out there is moving forward, and give us a chance, or give them a chance to speak. As you said, that what Colin did, I don't believe it was negatively intended, but honestly heartfelt need to produce the attitude of what a lot of the athletes have, but they can't say. Back in the day, you didn't get the dollar bill, so they couldn't hurt you. But now you say 3 words and you might be out there passing your bucket, on the street to pay for your Tuscaloosa. But we didn't do that back then. So the chance is needed. We do have a voice. We do have a sense of need. We do have a challenging front to protect the young folks who's coming along beside, so they can stay off the street and don't be flapping their flubs calling it a rap.
We've been talking a little bit about the opportunities that media have, and I haven't been in the media as long as any of these people up here, so I'm still learning and I'm still growing. And I would say, as a newcomer, you know, I feel like you're trying to make your way, and you're trying to find a way to build your brand and to be successful in this industry in the same way that we need to educate our athletes about the platform they have. As media personnel, we need to educate ourselves too, and we need to make sure we're taking the time to educate people in the sports media, because I find that one of the biggest challenges I have, and one of the biggest, I would guess, worries, concerns, maybe too strong of a word, but how do you balance having the access that you have and making sure you're telling the story that also needs to be told, and being a journalist and reporting the facts, but also, as we start to shift in more of this opinion-based media world, being on the right side of history and telling the right story as well. And so finding that balance, especially when you're somebody who's new and trying to prove it and trying to show that you belong here, that's something that I weigh every day, and something that I struggle with and I challenge myself to continue to do a better job at. But for new people like me who are coming up in the industry, I think that that's a very real challenge, in the same way that these guys who are coming into the NBA for the first time, and they're on this platform in their first year or their second year in the NFL, new professional athletes, figuring out that where you lie on that moral spectrum is a real challenge.
I'm curious, actually, Tommy and others, in getting that information about the positions that you want to take, and also fully understanding, I think, and managing the risk that is incurred by stepping out and speaking out. What's your advice or thoughts to athletes today who maybe observe what Colin and NBA players and others are doing, and are trying to figure out when to step forward and what information they need to know about an issue before stepping forward?
Well, I think Colin's torch is starting to get doused a little bit. You know, I remember speaking with him and how big it was at the time and how much momentum there was at the time. You mentioned the WNBA players, high school football players, high school athletes, college athletes. Everybody was jumping on board. Well, not everybody, but a lot of people were jumping on board on you know, Colin Kaepernick's movement. And then the NBA season started. And I went to Warriors Media Day, and everybody's talking about it, and I'm like, okay, at some point there's gonna be a game, and at some point there's gonna be a national anthem. Oh man, this league's predominantly black. Let's see what they do. Oh, I can't wait. And what did they do?
Nothing.
Pretty much nothing. David West stood 2 feet behind when the Warriors did the national anthem, their first preseason game in Vancouver. Everybody else locked arms or did something in solidarity. There was a lot said, but it seemed like, I don't know if they got scared or what, but league-wide it was so shockingly quiet. I really thought that a predominantly black league was going to take Kaepernick's torch and run with it and make it even stronger, but instead it seemed like they just, you know, doused it in water and did unity stuff and moved on.
But I don't know if it's dousing it. I just don't know that everyone agreed that that was the appropriate way to get a message across. And I think some guys, when you talk to them individually, have been pretty outspoken, but there isn't a unified kind of movement. But there, you know, by the end of the season, I remember the last game of the season, I looked at Colin, and there he and 2 of his teammates were taking a knee, and the 2 teammates weren't even dressed for the game, and it was just like, it felt like it had been diminished. It felt small, and it felt like it didn't go anywhere. But I still think it was important, and it did start a national conversation. So whether or not, you know, that specific kind of protest goes on, I still think it was an important moment for sports right now. I don't know what's going to come of it, though.
There can be no end unless there's a beginning, and someone have to start that particular beginning. You reap what you sow, and I think it's mindfully important for the athletes. Let's go down to a bit now, not Colin's financial situation or his age, but to go down to the junior college, the high schools, even the babies who are getting their season canceled because they took a knee in Texas, I think. The responsibility basically there starts at home. You can't, this shouldn't be done for importance. It should be done because it's a need to do so. The steps forward can cross that bridge that was built by those who've gone along before us. There's an educational process. As I said, you reap what you sow. There's always going to be some type of challenge after you make any type of stand. So you must be ready for that stand. I think Cullen was. I think he probably didn't know how big, but he must have recognized that I'm the only one that's doing this. It's national television. I'm a professional football player, but I have something to say. That's a challenge, and I think there is a redemption in positive challenges that a lot of us don't take because we're afraid what mama's going to say. And there's a lot of different mamas out there, and what they're going to say. So I think the responsibility is great, but I think the educational process behind what you're doing is even greater. Think.
I think, Jocelyn, I was just going to say that, a lot of it has to do with how big a concern is something for you. And it reminded me, and Tommy can speak to this and some of the older athletes. I mean, we've run things on our site. Oscar Robertson written a piece and others in that era about literally not playing games, not, because of treatment, because of mistreatment, and making a stand that we will not participate, we will not play.
You instructors out there, you bus drivers out there, you garbage disposer people out there, anybody, you got to rise too. You can't do what you're doing, give back to society, unless you make an effort to plant that seed I was alluding to earlier. Now this is not talking $1 million, this is only talking common sense. Their daddy got common sense.
He did. But I do like Tommy, what you were talking about in terms of kind of that grassroots, right? So, because I work in youth sports and I do leadership life skills development at the youth sports level. And to me, I'm constantly looking like, how do we bridge that gap between that elite athlete and this 13-year-old girl who's doing figure skating or basketball or whatever it is? How do we start to bridge that gap? Because sports is a microcosm of society, and it's an opportunity to let kids try all these things that we expect them to do as adults, like teamwork, like communication, like being competitive. So for me, that's where I'm always trying to get it. How do we bridge, the elite athlete, which is 1% of 1%, to the 99% of kids who are going to play sports and not go on to college? And how do we make that connection? I was at dinner on a Friday night and talking with a bunch of young kids of my friends, and I said, do you know who Colin Kaepernick is? Do you pay attention to what he does? And it was 3 girls, none of them who obviously play football, and they're like, yeah, we know who he is. Yeah, we see that, we understand. We don't always know what he's fighting for. And it was a really great conversation about it. But they know, and it's our jobs to help connect that dots, because they're getting these images all of the time, and how do we connect the dots between what they see and what that means, and really grooming them to take over the reins and understand that conversation moving forward.
Yeah, and that gets to my next question, which is how do we connect, whether it's a form of activism on the field, whether it's a donation to an organization, how do we connect the action that an athlete takes to sustainable change? And I ask that with the context of, for the work we've done over the past several months, we've, for example, worked with some NBA players many of whom are younger and maybe are not, or for whatever reason, connected to policy change. They're more interested in seeing social action or just working in schools. And then you have several players, like for example, we did an event with the New York Giants and Senator Cory Booker, because they wanted to do an in-depth discussion on policy and data. And so how do you connect, recognizing that athletes and leagues and athletes within leagues are all over the map in terms of what they want to do, where they're at, and let's say they come to the table, they want to be an activist, they make a statement of some way. How do you then take that to the next step? And who can help with that? How can we all help with that? Whether it's taking the athlete to the next step, or others in the sports world, or others just beyond in the general community. What is that next step How do we take it? And how can each of us kind of be involved in that? Is it policy change? Should we be thinking about policy change in the criminal justice system at the federal level, for example? Or is it mentoring in elementary and middle schools? What is the next step beyond activism? Beyond the first activist step, I should say.
Yes, all of the above. I mean, I think it is. I think it's some combination of everything, because, you know, I think doing this march, for example, this weekend, makes you feel good, makes you like, yes, we can. And Dr. Edwards, I was talking to him yesterday, and he's like, all right, so now what you gonna do? What you gonna do? He just kept saying that over and over again, and I think that's the challenge, and that's really what this institute is about, is really trying to figure out how to execute and change these words and these feelings and what's written on a sign into partly policy change, partly changing the idea of implicit bias, partly changing you know, young kids and the social situation within which they grow up. So I think it's a little bit of everything.
Sports, activism, and social change, from words to action, it says it all. And this, I do believe, at least I hope, the town hall here is a great kickoff. There has been others before this now, but this is the biggest kickoff, or bigger kickoff, to institute these thoughts as seeds, and they grow, because there is a need. And Ra for San Jose State, who now have running, what is it called, cars that run with electricity, what do you call them?
Streetcars?
Yeah, they didn't have cars, even cars when I got here. And I got streetcars, okay. Yeah. Go San Jose, go. I'm through now.
Well, I hope that also, you know, as part of the media, we get the word out, whether people like it or not, start the discussion. You know, and that's what this is about too. Hopefully, you know, I know San Jose State's doing something groundbreaking.
Amen.
But maybe the next school wants to do this, and the next school wants to do it, and hopefully it grows. But I think the media, good, bad, or indifferent, plays a big role in these stories getting out. Anne's columns, you know, everybody may not like what Anne has to say all the time, and that's okay. But she starts the fire, starts the discussion. So I do think the media plays a big role in the social change as well.
Yeah, I mean, and I think, you know, just what you said, Jocelyn, what Rise does, I mean, you know, I hope the Undefeated is part of that too, to be conveners, you know, to try to be thought leaders, to not just sit on the sidelines and produce journalism and other forms of content, but to actually bring people together. You know, you just give me a great idea for another series of things we can do, which is, you know, not just bring athletes together, but bring them with people that they normally wouldn't interact with, you know, policy leaders, people who run different kinds of organizations and interest groups. And sometimes, you know, they don't really know how to connect what they're interested in with who can help them affect change. And that's an important role too, to kind of bring together conversations that wouldn't happen otherwise.
Yeah, one of the sort of the overarching themes we've seen this season, this NFL season and the NBA season, is that even if an athlete doesn't feel, you know, fully ready to speak out on a particular issue or wants to you know, make a big statement on the field, just them attending an event gets other people in the room who otherwise wouldn't come to the table, and then they have the conversation. The athlete welcomes everyone, and then everyone else has the conversation, and then solutions come from that. And I think that, to me, is one of the most powerful ways an athlete, regardless of whether they're a marquee athlete or whether they're you know, not as well known outside a particular market, when they show up to a school, when they show up to a college, when a prominent alum comes back to their alma mater, that gets people in the room who otherwise wouldn't even, you know, think I want to come to this discussion about race in America today, or I want to talk about the need to build better bonds between community and law enforcement. Someone who might not want to even, who's from law enforcement, who doesn't want to talk to the other side, or someone from community doesn't want to talk to law enforcement, they come and they talk, because those athletes invite them. So I think that's one of the more powerful ways that we can see that athletes can be a part of change, and then we talk about it, we cover it, we support that athlete so that they do it again.
You know, Kaepernick had an event that I went to in Oakland, and he wasn't really trying to get much publicity off of it, but if you didn't like him for some reason, for any things he said, you had to respect him from this event. But it was sad. He had somebody there talking to kids with a checklist on what do you do if you're arrested or if your family member's arrested, which I'm like, wow, these kids are in high school or junior high, and they're reading these things to him. He had a lady talk to him about eating healthy even if you can't afford to eat healthy. He had another person there talking about how to get to a junior college if you couldn't come to San Jose State, like how to further your education. And then he had another guy there talking about just Black history, things that the kids should know. And I was super impressed by that.
Why doesn't that story get out there as much as the kneeling?
Can I just say something to that? That's something that athletes
Prominent on the undefeated.
will do is no, but there is this kind of mindset, well, that's my private business. Or I don't want to be looked at as only doing it for publicity. Yeah. So they don't
let too many people come either.
They don't let us in to things like that. And believe me, those are the stories that would be great to be able to tell. So I think that there needs to be, and also, and no offense to professional sports teams, there are a lot of gatekeepers for these guys. And they, NFL PR people have been pretty much trained to just say, last question, as soon as you ask a question. And so even if Colin Kaepernick wants to stand in the locker room and talk at length about his feelings, he's got these people trying to stop the conversation. So I think that agents and PR people and other people need to understand that there is value to these things that don't occur on the field, that maybe aren't making money for the teams, but that their value in representing the athlete and who they are and what they're trying to do. And so I would hope that some of those barriers get broken down and the media does get to cover them.
Last question.
You have a job with the NFL.
Thank you for the applause. Last question. As we now transition to our next panel, our next discussion, we're going to have a quick break, but I wanted to have one final question or one opportunity for each of you to share with the audience your thoughts on where we go from here. Observing everywhere we've been from through history at this moment, this very unique moment that we are in, with a new president, with all of the activism that we've seen occur just over the past few days, with the sports industry poised to be a role in advocating for justice moving forward. What is your advice to athletes, to others in the audience today, both here in San Jose and watching on the live feed, for what do we do next? What comes next?
You know,
I'll put you on the spot.
I know you put me on the spot like the first time too.
You're the editor-in-chief. That's your.
You know, I'm gonna defer whatever Tommy says. You know, I'm gonna go with that but I think to represent themselves. I mean, I think it's possible in whatever profession you are, and athletes have this great megaphone in there. They can reach people that can't be reached otherwise. I mean, I see how kids in places where they have these conflicts and gang and feuds, and then the athletes can dissipate some. They have power and ways of reaching people, and so I think that should be taken seriously. And I think that the responsibility also goes to the leagues and the teams to give them room to be themselves, to express themselves as individuals. And our responsibility, I think, is to really try to not be passive as media, and to actually go search for stories that are not in front of our faces. I think that's going to go a long way to kind of continuing what we see going on in the country. With everybody wants the country to be better. You know, they may have different ways of expressing, but our job is to kind of be aggressive about it, I think.
Danielle.
I guess I would say that, in 2017, there's a lot of things that are new, but there are a lot of things that are still the same. And for me, somebody who's, continuing to try to find her voice, and you see all of these changes happening and you don't know what to do, or you don't always know what to say. So sometimes you feel like if you don't have everything together, you should just not do anything. But I feel like my kind of personal mantra, and what I hope for athletes, what I hope for media, what I hope for everyone, is don't let what I can't do stop me from doing what I can. And it might not be perfect, it might not come out in the right way all the time, but there's always something I can do, and it's not like knowing what to do, it's doing what you know is right and do it.
Mr. Smith, you gotta go last.
Okay, that's a good point. Go ahead.
That's true.
Go ahead. We'll have you close us out, Tommy.
I would just say be brave. We're at a crossroads in our society right now, and it's time for all of us to be brave, so athletes too.
Mark?
I think as media, we can't be afraid to report the uncomfortable. I had a story about how there's only 4 black general managers in the NBA. I had another story about what it's like to be a white NBA player. Kevin and them did a great job, and I was nervous for a lot of my coworkers at the Undefeated who were basically boots on the ground during inauguration, filming people yelling and screaming and fighting, and I was nervous that something could happen to some of my coworkers, but they weren't scared to go out there to report the uncomfortable. So I think in order for us to grow as a country, as people, hopefully as media, we keep putting those uncomfortable stories out there so people could talk about it.
Plant your seed and cultivate it with love and care. The fruit will taste much sweeter. 2 things. Silver and gold have I none, but such as I have give I thee. You don't need money to impress. Impress with your educational background and your love to exude the need that children need to move forward. Have faith, which is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. You might not see it, but it's around there. If it wasn't, you wouldn't be here to make that step forward. Bless you.
Thank you. Please join me in thanking this great panel.
Good morning, everybody. My job right now is twofold. 1, to introduce some folks, and 2, they tell me I need to resettle the audience, so please resettle. It's a real pleasure to have everybody here today. My name is Paul Lanning. I'm the Vice President for University Advancement at San Jose State University, and also the CEO of the Tower Foundation here at the university that supports everything that we do in higher education with the university. I hope you're continuing to dialogue with your social networks through Twitter, through Facebook, through Instagram, and other forums. We have the hashtag SJSU Words to Action, so please continue to keep that dialogue going throughout the day today. I also encourage you in the lobby, we have a couple of special postcards that we've created for this event. I encourage you to pick up a handful of each, share them, send them out, spread the word about what we're doing here at San Jose State. We're very excited about this institute. And one of the reasons that today is possible is because of the generosity of Mr. Jed York and the York family, owners of the San Francisco 49ers. Jed is here today, and I want to thank him very, very much for his support of this institute and of this program today. We're also privileged to have a number of other dignitaries in the audience, and unfortunately I can't introduce everybody, but I thank you all for being here today, and we're very, very excited that you can participate in this discussion. The first panel today I think was a wonderful discussion. It primes us for what is to come, which is a very exciting second discussion shortly. As President Papazian shared, San Jose State is very proud to be launching an institute for the study of sports, society, and social change. And we're starting the work today with this conversation that is emblematic of our public engagement as the leading public university in the West, the oldest public university in the West, and the only public university serving the Silicon Valley. So when we think about innovation, we think about creativity, we think about the Silicon Valley, there's one public university in the Silicon Valley, and this is San Jose State. We're very, very proud to be a part of this tremendous history that we have, as well as the future. Faculty from multiple disciplines throughout the university will be working to provide the academic foundations for the Institute's work going forward, and that is all executing upon a vision that we've worked on for the past year or so with Dr. Harry Edwards. So thank you, Dr. Edwards. We'll meet him shortly. And also, of course, we know that Dr. Edwards and Ken Noel, who's also here in the audience today, were the architects of the Olympic Project for Human Rights. You have the opportunity to pick up a very special item. We've commissioned through Dr. Edwards some versions of the original button from the Olympic Project for Human Rights in 1968, and those are available in the lobby. We encourage you to make a small donation to the Institute to support our work, but those buttons are available to show your support for that history as well as for where we're headed here. We're also proud to have invited a wide group of experts with diverse perspectives to help shape the Institute's efforts. We've formed an advisory board that will continue to grow over time, but the initial members, the founding members, are lending their time and talent today and going forward to help launch this institute. And we want you to know who they are. Many, but not all, but just about all are here with us today, so please hold your applause while I introduce each of them. You've already met Jocelyn Benson, the CEO of RISE. We're very happy to have her as one of our founding board members. A San Jose State alumnus in journalism, Marcos Bertone, author and columnist for the Sacramento Bee, is here today and part of our advisory board. You all know John Carlos, an Olympian, a medalist, one of our esteemed members of that 1968 Olympic track and field team. He is unable to be here. He is in Houston today, but he sends his regards and is committed to helping us with this institute. Of course, Dr. Harry Edwards, again, the founder of this project, as well as the Olympic Project for Human Rights, and you'll meet him shortly, another San Jose State alumnus. Andy Feinstein, the San Jose State Senior Vice President and Provost, is here today and is a part of this. And I'm very pleased to also say that the president of the San Francisco 49ers, Al Guido, who has joined us today, is also a member of the advisory board. Thank you, Al, for being a part of this exciting effort. And then joining me as well on the advisory board are Jared Shawley, the Chief Operating Officer of the San Jose Earthquakes, who have been very, very strong supporters of this effort as well. And you all know Tommy Smith. He is another of our illustrious Olympian alumni here at San Jose State. He is a part of the advisory board. In addition, Mark Spears, who you met a little while ago, I don't think many know that he is another journalism alumnus of San Jose State. We have an amazing journalism program here. And both Mark and Marcos are products of that program that goes back many, many years. John Tortora, the Chief Operating Officer of the San Jose Sharks, also on the advisory board. We're so thankful that the local professional teams are supporting this effort. And one of the great honors I've had working here is to get to interact with a true legend, I think, for all of us, and that is Yosh Uchida, who is a 96-year-old judo legend, an Olympic legend. He is here today. And Yosh, we thank you not just for serving on this advisory board, but for everything you have done throughout the last 70-plus years at San Jose State University. Thank you so much. And finally, Kathleen Wong Lau, the Chief Diversity Officer at San Jose State, who joined us this past summer. She is, as well, a member of this advisory board for the Institute. Please join me in thanking all of these folks for being a part of this effort. Our first panel today provided rich perspectives on the legacy and perhaps the future of sports activism. Now let's turn the discussion to what the future really might look like going forward.
I wish I knew how it would feel to be free. I wish I could break all the chains holding me.
The greatest football player and perhaps the greatest all-around athlete in the history of American sports. A committed community activist who decades ago took on the challenges and problems of one of the most explosive and enduring problems of the last 5 decades in this society. The status, circumstances, and outcomes of young men of color. Young men who have so often been written off by the larger society as unsalvageable and as irretrievably criminal elements, even by some in their own communities. It is a privilege to have here my friend of the last 50 years, NFL Hall of Famer, and the only panelist to actually have sat down with the new president, the incomparable Mr. Jim Brown. Also here is another product of UCLA, the institution that gave us Kenny Washington and Woody Strode, who desegregated professional football locker rooms in 1946, and that gave us later that same year the immortal Jackie Robinson. He was an All-America every year of his collegiate basketball career. He is an NBA Hall of Famer and the league's all-time leading scorer. He's a Presidential Medal Award winner, a best-selling book author, an award-winning writer for the Washington Post and Time magazine and numerous other publications, and one of the most intellectually brilliant and engaging minds that I have ever encountered, either in or beyond the arena, Mr. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Also on the panel is Mr. Chris Webber. I first became aware of Chris during his years as a member of a class of extremely gifted high school All-America basketball players recruited to the University of Michigan and dubbed the Fab Five. But it was not his basketball brilliance that captured my attention. As the nominal leader of the Fab Five, I was impressed with his responses to often dismissive and even assaultive and racist questions and comments from a hostile mainstream media and sports establishment. It was that which captured my attention. The music the Fab Five listened to, the way they dressed, the style of ball they played were all roundly condemned. In fact, they were deemed thugs, listening to thug music on headphones, dressing on and off the court like thugs, speaking like thugs, playing thug basketball. Chris handled himself with class, considered thoughtfulness, and with an unusual measure of courage, eloquence, and grace, given his age and circumstances at the time. When he entered the NBA, I was consulting with the Golden State Warriors, and I went to managing owner Dan Fernand's office and all but bowed from the ankles and begged him to push the organization to draft Chris, which they did. He has continued to exude rare thoughtfulness and class in his roles as an NBA game announcer and color commentator, always engaging and informative, especially with regard to issues that arise at the interface of race, sport, and society. I want to thank him for the longer shorts that he and the Fab Five brought into existence, because if anyone were to go out today and wear the shorts that Kareem and Jim and I wore as collegians, somebody would call the Vice Squad. Mr. Chris Webber. Our next panelist is Anquan Boldin. Football at the NFL level is about as close as you can get to war and still stay civil. So I'm always amazed when some fan who has probably never lifted anything heavier than a six-pack of beer, who probably couldn't run out of sight if you gave him all day, who couldn't take a snap at an NFL practice, comments that some player or another is lacking in courage. Wrong. Those without courage never put the cleats and the pads on to begin with. But even among those who strap on the helmet, there's a group of individuals who stand apart owing to their unique measures of toughness and courage. Ronnie Lott, Dick Butkus, John Mackey, Mike Ditka, Jim Brown, and Anquan Boldin. A gifted receiver who once suffered a broken jaw and came back to finish the game and finish the season, Anquan was recipient of the 2015 coveted Walter Payton Man of the Year Award in recognition of his community service. His commitment to community service also led him in 2016 to organize a group of professional athletes to visit Congress to express their concerns about issues of justice and community development. Mr. Anquan Boldin. If Hollywood asked me to create a character who epitomized the look, competitive disposition, and attitude and name of an NFL linebacker, I would give them someone who looked like, played like, and who had a name like Takeo Spikes. I had the privilege of getting to know Takeo during his time with the 49ers. I was always impressed with him as an all-pro linebacker, but I was even more impressed with his intellectual curiosity. He was always asking questions. In fact, it was based on that inquisitiveness that I suggested to him that following his football career, he should run for elective office, not because he had all the answers, but because he had a rare penchant for asking the right questions. He continues to this day to do exactly that. So I was not at all surprised when he called me in the wake of Colin Kaepernick's demonstrations. Takeo didn't ask me about Cap's intended message, as did the media. He didn't ask about if his actions were received well in the locker room. His question was, what is the ideological framing and what is fueling, what is driving Cap's protest? And what are the chances of his activism spreading to other players, to other locker rooms, and even intensifying? Right out of Hollywood Central Casting, Mr. Tequil Spikes. And finally, he's already been on the first panel. One of my proteges, Mr. Tommy Smith, one half of the most iconic sports photo of the 20th century, as has been judged by a number of national magazines around the world. Mr. Tommy Smith, a national treasure. The panel for this second program.
Remove all the bars that keep us apart. I wish you could know what it means to be me. Then you'd see and agree that every man should be free.
Well, let's go to work, all right?
Let's do it.
My first question is for Mr. Jim Brown, a man who has had a tremendous impact throughout his career on young people in particular. In point of fact, when he did Dirty Dozen, a lot of us quit wearing our denim jackets and field hand jackets, and we went to the fatigue jacket. And knowing that he was going to be here, I went back and got mine out from 1968.
Still fit.
And I still wear it. So I hope you don't mind, Jim, but I'm gonna, this is Robert Jefferson, ladies and gentlemen. The first question that I have, Jim, goes to you. There's been a lot of conversation, of course, about the fact that you sat down with the president. And as usual, we've been talking for 50 years, and nothing will stop us from talking. And when you called me, you made 3 points that I think are critically important. First, that he's the president. Nothing's going to change that. Secondly, our kids are being shot and killed, even in the president's hometown of Chicago. Grandmamas, babies, toddlers, young men, and so forth. And if somebody stands up and says, I'm going to do everything I can to help resolve that, as you put it, I don't care if it's a Martian in the White House, I'm going in. And then, of course, the other point you made, have we really gotten to the place where we're afraid to even sit down and talk to each other? Have we gotten to the place where we do not even want to sit across the table from each other? All of which are arguable points. But the question I have for you is, what are the deliverables? What is it that you expect to come out of this situation, especially given the price that you paid in the eyes of some for even going in the first place?
Thank you for that introduction. I am an American citizen. I voted for Hillary Clinton, and we lost. I look to the seat of power, which is the President of the United States. Donald Trump won that seat. Therefore, a lot of people went home and sat down and started complaining and voicing their opinions on him. I went back to the people that I had ready to be able to do certain things that were positive for our young people across this country, and told them that I would reach out to the president. But his people reached out to me, and they liked my program, the American program. And we've been sitting there with young people across the country ready to do the job of violence intervention, to deal with education, and to deal with jobs. So consequently, it is not what you talk about, it is what you can put into order and to take action in making things better for those who can't make them better for themselves. So I'm here as a person that's donating my time to a positive change in this country and to call attention to those people down there that I've not heard too many people talk about tonight.
Thank you. to take off on something else that I think is critically important, I remember Richard Pryor famously saying that when he set himself on fire, that a lot of people came in, they were saying, Richard, I understand you've had a hard life. Geez, how I understand how you could get in the dumps like this. But when you came in, he would run those stories on you. And after about a half hour of him running them, you would say, yeah, but what you gonna do? And then he would go into another half hour and you would say, yeah, but what you gonna do? And so we're at that same situation now. I was looking at the protests, and one of the things that kept popping into my mind after all these brilliant speeches and everything that people gave in the protest, it kept popping into my mind, but what you gonna do? And so the question I have for the panel is, given where we are now, and the whole history of sports, Jackie Robinson, Smith and Carlos, Jim Brown, Muhammad Ali, and so forth, what do you see athletes' role as in this situation that we're in today? What can athletes really do? What can they contribute? Anyone?
I think that athletes can raise consciousness. A lot of young people really admire athletes. They want to be like them. They're interested in what they're interested in. And just by being curious about what the athletes that they admire are doing, a lot of young people find their way to social activism. I know in my life, just reading some of the things that Bill Russell wrote enabled me to understand how I had to approach my activism, and it really helped me. And I thank Bill every time I get into a position like this for his leadership at a time when there were no other leaders for young black athletes. He was the only guy, he was the voice in the wilderness, and really enabled me to focus and get a better idea how to cope, because people didn't want to hear about how angry you were. They wanted to hear what the issue was. And communicating your anger can really lead people not to listen to what your issues are. So I kind of figured that out by having Bill Russell do his thing and go through what he went through, and it enabled me to have a better grasp on how to deal with these things.
Takeo, in 2010, the San Francisco 49ers players awarded you the highest award that San Francisco 49ers as an organization gets, the Lynn Eshmont Award for Courage and so forth. Kaepernick got that same award for the Colin Kaepernick got that same award for the 2016 season. But the media had him split in the locker room, resentment because the press reporters gathered around his locker even though he was a backup and sometimes wasn't even on the field after the game, and so forth and so on. How could the press get it so wrong? I mean, what is the nature of the bonds among guys in a locker room where the press could get it so wrong?
I think it's fair to say I can speak on this pretty strong because now that I'm not playing, I'm part of the media. And so I think bottom line is this: when you look at that situation and people in America who don't have the privilege to be in that locker room, and the only thing that they can rely or draw upon is what someone put in print, how can it be so wrong? I think a lot of times us as media members, not everybody, but you come into a situation with a preconceived notion in your mind of this is what's happening. And when you go get your story, if that athlete or somebody who has a strong post on that situation, if they're not giving you what you want, then you choose to pull out certain things to make your story come to life as far as what you wanted to say. And then, to be honest, a lot of people are lazy. And so when a lot of people get that information, they'll say, oh, you know what? Let me quote this right here, and then it comes around and turns into like a wildfire. And so for me, when I look at it overall, I won that award in 2010. And when I saw Colin Kaepernick, his teammates voted him to win that same award, it spoke volumes to me. It really confirmed what I already knew, and what I knew is that people in general don't understand what goes on in the locker room. And the question comes up, well, is the media making the locker room divisive? Absolutely not. Because his teammates know. They may not come out and admit it. Some will, but the majority won't come out and admit it, but they know the stance, the fight, what he's fighting for is right. And Dr. Edwards, you taught me this. At the end of the day, you can be honest when you can't be right. And so, to wrap that up, guys in that locker room, that is the highest honor that you can get in that locker room, because it's not so much of what you've done on the football field. It's you having courage, and this is what my teammates told me after I won the award. They say, Takeo, I don't even know if you're going to be here next year. We were going through a lockout through the CBA. I was the player representation for our team. And so they say, you know what, we appreciate everything that you've done, and we know that you put your neck out there to be able to fight for us to have an opportunity to have what's right for us in our CBA going forward. And so, I commend Colin Kaepernick and his teammates for really putting a bow on that situation, for letting people know that regardless of whatever story you may try to paint or however you may try to tell it, this award really confirms what he means to us.
Thank you. Thank you. Chris, the NBA as an institution has been way out in front on a lot of issues. The Miami Heat team front office supported the hoodie protests with D. Wade and LeBron. The league moved on Donald Sterling when that situation came down. They supported LeBron, Chris Paul, Carmelo Anthony, and D. Wade when they went on the ESPYs and literally made a call to action. In the environment that we're in now, this situation could escalate. Is there any point that you can conjure up, even imagine, where the NBA would say, no, that's a bridge too far. That is now interfering with our product, our game, the business we're in. How does the NBA, in point of fact, how does any league who's trying to stay out in front of this kind of thing and be on the right side of history, where are the lines? Do you see any lines?
First of all, thank you for having me here, and thank you for the sacrifice of you guys up here. And I think first, the NBA players, not more than any other sport, but the NBA players have tried to be on the forefront for several different reasons, because of the vestiges of the sacrifices of Bill Russell, of Kareem, the best player in the game. And we see, too, how their stance may have later on affected their careers. The fact that Kareem doesn't own the team, and the fact that he hasn't been a coach, the fact we don't say these things about him when we know he's the best player. We know because he spoke out that the vestiges of that have affected you, and thank you for your sacrifice. I do want to thank the league for being as open as it was, but then again, you have to know the history. So when you had the Spencer Haywood case, that's the case of the first guy coming in and not going to college. Well, it wasn't David Stern, the lawyer, that welcomed him back into the league. During games, they would say, we have a illegal player on here. And it wasn't until Kareem gave him the soul pound that everyone said, we accept this, right at half court, am I correct? And it was guys like that saying, we embrace you. It was guys like what you did and Colin Kaepernick did that locker room showed. So first of all, it's up to the players to keep the legacy of the sacrifices they've already done. And so very proud of LeBron and Dwayne Wade, Melo, and others guys for doing that. Secondly, I do think the league has been proactive in knowing its players. Just because I'm from Detroit, and just because I've been privileged enough to make it to the league to be able to sit on this dais doesn't mean that, my family hasn't been affected by murder, that we haven't been affected by crime. And so I think, too, that we have to realize that we're no better or we didn't make it out, and therefore we don't have to go back in and we have to continue to spread the word. I do think that there will be a time when the NBA says, no, we can't go past that line because they're a business, and all businesses are going to have to make that decision. But by the players feeling empowered, by the players knowing that they have a voice, by the players knowing that that community that supports us expects something from us, because we're that community. To say we're not that community is laughable. So we're that community, and so I think there will be a point when the league has to step back or maybe not say as much, but hopefully that's when we players, the younger players, will continue to take on the causes and the lessons that the older generations have taught us in going forward.
Yeah, and of course, a great deal of that is anticipating where that line might be with the league and then developing a strategy where you can get done what you need to get done despite the fact that that line is there, and you can get it done on this side of the line without crossing it and therefore maintain the support of the league. So a lot of it is homework, and that's why I'm glad that guys like you are out there who are constantly looking at this issue and trying to articulate the situation. And Quan, you went to Congress with some folks. I mean, what kinds of things do you think athletes can ask for, can go to elected officials to talk about? I know that if in this area, if Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and Draymond Green went to the mayor of Oakland and said, hey, here's what the situation is, she wouldn't tell them to get lost. So there's a lot of power and leverage there. What kinds of things do you think athletes can do of a constructive fashion to move from protest to progress?
Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Anybody can chime in.
Okay. Well, one of the things is what you're doing now is to organize our voice and to help out. As I look and I play with over 6 or 7 NBA teams, and I feel that many times the players donated more money to the community personally than the teams did. And they had to do that because you put our contracts in the paper, you put us against the communities, and you don't put the owner's contract in the paper. Therefore, if a guy gives $300,000 to Pal, am I saving the community by doing that, or am I just trying to help? And so I thank you for what you're doing, because now it won't be wasted action. We can come to a platform, find out how to organize, ask questions, find out what needs to be the next role, because all these players are willing, and that's why so many get taken advantage of by having a program over here, and not knowing what's going on and wanting to do something. And so I think the first thing is to, again, take the lessons from our older generations, then to bring them to a place like this to talk to you and to have a outgoing program. Because if you look at most of these teams, especially basketball, which is all I can speak about, the main players on the team donate more to their communities than the teams do, definitely financially.
Yeah. And Quan?
Well, for me, it's number one, I feel like I'm where I am for a reason. I feel like all of us as athletes, we have a platform. And for us to let our platform go without bringing about change would be a waste. I come from a less fortunate area. So a lot of us, our backgrounds are similar, where we didn't have a lot growing up. So we understand what it's like to go without. We understand what it's like to lack. And just because we made it or successful right now doesn't mean that we're not still affected by everyday issues. So my thing is, and I've been fortunate enough to work with different organizations and to kind of see how people respond to athletes. Quick example, I was working with Oxfam America about mining issues in Africa. And before I joined on, they had been trying to get a meeting with the Senate for 2 years. And myself, Larry Fitzgerald, Roddy White, we teamed up with them. We went to Senegal. We saw the problems that were going on, and we promised those people that we would go back and advocate on their behalf. And we got in contact with senators and congressmen, and within a 2-week period, we were in their offices meeting with them. And that just goes to show the power that we have. And I don't think a lot of guys in the locker room understand that. There's a lot of guys that are in the locker room that are willing to help, but they don't understand how powerful their voice is. So for me, this past year, I just tried to get guys that are well respected in the locker room, guys that I know people will pay attention to because they've done it the right way. And, you know, we went back to Capitol Hill and we discussed with them what we see the problems being. We also listening and trying to figure out how can we be a part of the solution? How can we help not just nationally, but on the local and the state levels as well? Because we have a lot of power in those areas as well. So it's just getting guys to understand and realize just how much power you have. People pay attention to athletes. For whatever reason, they like us. So,
I think they like you a little bit better when you're winning, you know. I mean,
but I think, you know, it's a responsibility for everybody, not just athletes.
Yeah.
For the everyday man, and I commend Jed for what he's doing. I mean, we sit here and the athletes get a lot of criticism whenever they step out politically or when they don't do something in the community. But just think about if the owners, if the coaches, GMs, if everybody had a collective voice, how much more powerful we could be.
In terms of making the right decision. Let me ask, put a question out for Jim, Kareem, and Tommy. It's not enough to be right. We know that. Because as I stated, we're a divided society, people all over the place with their opinions and so forth. Now they even have alternative facts. So a lot of folks are not going to be happy. What I would like for Jim and Kareem and Tommy to just very briefly talk about the price of trying to do exactly the thing that because there are people who say, shut up, sit down, play football, and get lost till I need an autograph or a pair of shoes or a jersey signed. What would you say to today's athletes about the cost of trying to do the right thing and about the process of trying to do the right thing? Because to be quite honest with you, I know a lot of athletes, I'm glad they're quiet because they haven't done their homework, not interested in doing their homework, but they want to say something, they want to talk, you know. So I want Jim, Kareem, and Tommy, what would you say to today's athletes in terms of the price and in terms of the time that we're in?
Well, Professor, I'm the oldest guy here, so I've been around a long time. And what I would say to the youngsters is read up on the history of this country. Read up on the heroes that have passed who have broken down the barriers so that we could be successful. Look at a Jack Johnson, a Paul Robeson, different kind of individuals, but yet they broke down barriers at a great cost. Okay, what cost are we going to pay to continue the work that they have done for us? So I would say that if you're bright enough, you understand that athletes of today, black or white, make a lot of money. Resources are necessary to do anything. You can't do anything without resources, okay? Your notoriety is power. So if you combine your resources and your notoriety, you will be able to forge ahead and probably make more changes than if you use any other methodology. So we are privileged by being in a position that we are because of the sacrifice of Jackie Robinson and those people. But if we don't take advantage of that and we use it the wrong way and we try to deal with it just as an individual, you're going to fail. But if you deal with like-minded people who have that kind of power and we use the money and the resources and the notoriety, we can make tremendous change.
Kareem?
I'd like to add to what Jim is saying about people coming together. So many of the athletes that are playing today that are from inner cities, a lot of black athletes, a lot of guys from the inner city that, or places where poverty has made its imprint on them. We all have a common history. And hopefully we will get to a point where some of these guys that are making all this wonderful, guys making $30 and $40 million, will get together and start trying to do economic projects. I would love to see a couple of guys get together and buy the Fairmont Hotel. And be able, when people in the black community want to learn about event planning and catering and all that, they can go to this hotel and get a job. They can't do that. Too many minority people do not have those types of assets that are open to their communities. So when athletes of color get together and come together economically to do something meaningful, it opens doors up that everybody from their communities can take advantage of. And that's how we make the steps into the middle class. So we got to start thinking like that. Too many people of color and minorities don't understand the strength that they get by banding together. So if all of these guys, 4 guys that make $30 million a year getting together to do an economic project, they're going to get something done. And it's going to have an impact. And they got to start thinking like that. I think people who have the opportunity to influence them have to start talking to them about that. Someone like Jay-Z could buy a whole city block in Brooklyn and start teaching and make it possible for the young men in that neighborhood to learn building skills. They can be electricians and plumbing and people who carpentry, finish carpentry and stuff, all the stuff that are building skills, they could learn that if someone with the money can put that in place. And then these young men can go out and earn a living for the rest of their lives and take care of their families. But too many of our young people aren't thinking in those terms.
Strategically like that.
And, the strategic use of capital and financial resources really has to be part of this, and we have to start thinking about that. So that's what I want to add to what.
Okay. Tommy, let me ask you this, and then I want to move on to the whole thing of paying athletes, because we're in a situation now where I think that inevitably we're going to have to deal with that. I think that amateur athletics at the collegiate level is done in revenue-producing sports, but I will get to that in just a minute. Let me ask you, Tommy, what would you say to Colin Kaepernick, who engaged in unconventional political expression and protest, much along the lines of what you're even using the same national anthem background? What would you say to him about the price of trying to do that, trying to wake people up? This is a young man who sparked that conversation on race that the Kerner Commission report called for in 1968, and all of the presidents and the talking heads and the corporations and the pundits, nobody had been able to get that done. But when he protested, all of a sudden everybody is talking about it, but there's a price to be paid. What would you say to him about the price to be paid and how you get through that?
Yeah, and I will be quick. I like quickness. I like 10 flats, 1983 and 44.5. So I like quick things.
Okay, 19.3. I knew you had to bring that up, but that's okay. Go ahead.
As both the young ones said, Jim and Kareem, there is power in numbers. Okay, number one. Whether it's dollar bills or whether it's faces, there is power in that. But the platform that this power to be used is very important. The thought process. You reap what you sow. As I said before, there is redemption in proactivity in whatever you do. There is sacrifice in stepping out front, using your own knowledge of need to be when it happens. You must understand this. And I said, I am a grassroots person. I like to start from the little guys. I don't mean the little guys with their $10 in the pocket. I mean the little people with a computer we call a brain that needs programming. And if we don't program that brain, it's going to grow up in the gutter. We got athletes here with ideas of majesty. This need to grow so the little ones can know when they get here, it might not be the same, but their growth in understanding getting there, that is one of the biggest answers to growth, is understanding that there will be sacrifice in that growing. It's not always 100% I'm going to do because Kareem made $20 million a year. I know he didn't because I made $300 a week. But that understanding, I know, Doc, I'm going to finish here real quick. We don't see, in 1968, my God, on that victory stand, that wasn't the price. The price was getting there. The exaltation of standing up there was about as frightening as you could ever imagine. You're out in the wide open, the national anthem was playing. I had to show solidarity with those who did not have a voice. And my screaming started on the San Jose State campus when I said very little. I said to the audience before, I didn't talk very much. Action speaks louder than words. But sooner or later, that action is going to have to turn into words. There was one guy at this college when I was a freshman, told me as soon as I got there, I wish I hadn't seen him, to tell you the truth, Smith, where are your books? Books? What am I going to do with books? He said, if you don't carry books with you, how are you going to open them to find out what's on the inside? So the classification of my being there and learning came from someone who had already gone through what I am to go through. It's called education, it's called help. And I think that's what these young folks are talking about in terms of the knowledge of what one have to get what is needed from whatever flow in that chart. I'm talking about the money folks, the GMs, as you mentioned, and the other folks. So it's power in numbers, but those numbers would have to be categorized by the education of how they got those. They got the money to be famous or to be infamous in my case. Did you understand what I'm talking about?
I got the thrust of it.
Okay. That's the start.
Basically, what you're saying is that the sacrifice comes not just that in terms of the cost of making a political statement or a protest. It comes in terms of preparing yourself mentally and so forth to get to that point so that you understand what you're doing and are willing to pay that price. I think, Smitty, you were very clear.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Okay. Here's something I want to throw out to the whole panel. These protest movements have a way of picking up their own momentum. And they go into areas that no one really anticipated at the outset. One of the things that I'm almost certain is going to happen is that amateur sports, as we understand it and see it today, are finished at the collegiate level in terms of these revenue-producing sports. You have coaches who are making $8–10 million a year. You have schools and conferences that are being paid upwards of $50 million each for a national championship series and so forth. You also have athletes now in football who are saying, I'm not going to play in that bowl game because I don't want to get injured. I got my NFL career. I want to prepare for the NFL combine. The star athletes are increasingly dropping out of the process. So you have a situation where sponsors, where television networks, you have to really consider how long are they going to pay that prime money to see backups play in the bowl games. That can't last. You also have the contradiction of this tremendous amount of money swirling around these athletes and athletic departments in terms of salaries and so forth. Everybody is being paid except them. Eventually, even Rip Van Winkle woke up And so it's just a matter of time before these, and it's already beginning to go out over the internet. They're talking about it. One, should athletes be paid under those circumstances? And I think it's moving in that direction anyway, so I'm really asking a question of opinion, how you feel about it. And secondly, given the fact that you already have the concussion issue in sports, and as a consequence, increasing black representation on the field. I mean, you look at Mississippi State play Alabama, it looks like Ghana playing Nigeria. And the money, now you put money in it at the collegiate level, that enhances even more an incentive. Is this a good state of affairs for these revenue-producing sports if it moves in that direction? And two, do you support paying athletes, whether it's inevitable or not? I don't want to scare nobody up here now. Jim?
You talking to me?
Yeah. I'm talking to the Robert Jefferson in you.
Can I tell you something?
Yeah.
I'm going to pass on this one.
Okay. That's the first time I ever heard that.
I don't need to talk about that.
Yeah, I know. I understand. I understand.
You get one of the young.
But it's on its way. What should we feel about this? Where should we be on this? I think it's on its way. I don't see these networks and sponsors and everything paying to see backups, and the only way you can get guys to do it is the same way we've always done it in American society. You offer them more money.
Well,
That's
Doc,
how you get your champions to show up.
Doc, the question is really whether or not education should be put in its proper position. What you're talking about is all the upfront amenities. But when you go to college, you're supposed to be going to get an education. Okay? And so we have allowed the system to interject wealth and money at all costs. Now, if I go past that because it'll take too long and talk about today's athletes, a great portion of them, after 3 years of participation, claim bankruptcy. And the guy that's claiming bankruptcy after 3 years had about 25 million that he's gone through. That's a major problem for us, okay?
Mm-hmm.
That's all I have to say.
Okay, so you're saying that they may pay them, but what do they do with the money? Where's the financial training? Where's the budgeting? Where's the personal finances and stuff that would go along with that, which is education, which goes back to the basic problem.
That will be what you will value most as you get older. The education that you get will teach you how to work in the system that you're a part of. And you won't go bankrupt, and you will leave something for your family so that they can have the dignity that they deserve. Since I'm 80 years old, going on 81, it's a no-brainer for me. It's all simplified, because my wife is here, our 2 babies are home, and my objective is to use everything that I've learned through education to make sure that their life is better and that they can have dignity when I'm not there.
Since everybody is all over this paying athletes thing and speaking right up, let me move to a similar problem that I'm particularly.
We can talk about.
Okay, all right.
Because I definitely agree with Brother Brown about that, because unfortunately I've had a lot of my peers be in that situation. But I have a friend that made a bunch of money in the tech, and he lost everything, and we don't pity that like an athlete. I think where you're going to recruit these kids in the most desolate places of America, where there's no hope, and you go in and you tell a mother, I'll take care of your son for 4 years on a 4-year scholarship. It's not a 4-year scholarship, it's a 1-year scholarship. What is the value of education? I have friends that have graduated at the highest of class from the best universities and say they can't find a job. What is the balance of education? I mean, at the same time, it's still an institution. It's still a business. So let's separate business, education, all of these things, because there are kids that I went to school with that still have problems walking, bodies hurting from playing 2 years in college and don't have insurance from the years they played in college. There are guys that are married that are in college that can't afford to pay their kids. There are guys that can't afford to eat. We're acting like it's a guarantee because you go get this big guy from Mississippi or California, Florida, because he can run fast, as if it's a guarantee. It's really not a guarantee, but the coaches are putting it as if you're going to be guaranteed, as if this is going to happen. And so there needs to be a re-education for the parents, also for these kids as well. But you know, I think if we're all honest, we have to look at what is the value of an education, what is the value of education at this school, when you're going to this school for communications and you don't even want to be in communications, but the coach recruited you and told you it's a better team there. And so one of the funny things, I've been recruited since 12 years old. A lot of stuff been said about me. I took this, I took that. At 12 years old, I never hit a responsibility of the adult. You know what grooming a child is like? You know, they do that for universities. They groom a kid. Start calling them and tweeting them at 13 years old. Yeah. So what, I mean, this is a business. And so don't leave the kid and the mother and those and the father that those are just hoping for the American dream, because that's being pushed to them. You can do anything, and not saying, you know, after this we're going to need a financial advisor. No, they give you up to the agent that takes care of everybody and that they're getting the kickback from. You know, it's not as simple. It's not as simple.
Young people need also to understand that they're being exploited. People don't understand that. These kids don't understand that they're being exploited. They think, I got a chance to go play for the Wolverines. Oh my goodness. And you know, they've watched them since they were kids, and they're brought into it. And they act like, you know, it's like one of those movies from the 1930s, you know, where the college team, you know, they go out and they celebrate at the local malt shop. And the quarterback and the cheerleaders are getting it on and all. You know, that doesn't happen, man. This is business. These colleges are making so much money. And, you know, they exploit these guys. They have an insurance policy. The NC2A has an insurance policy that you're supposed to be able to use if you get hurt. But the only way that you can get paid is if you can't ever compete again. So if you're injured to the point where you can get up and walk, but you can't play your sport, you don't get anything. And the university rescinds your scholarship. So what do you get out of it? Nothing. And you end up back in your neighborhood, crippled for life, and no possibilities. So somebody needs to get on the NC2A's ass about educating these people. Because if it's about education, why do they have these policies in place? Why don't you let these guys finish their education and get something? You know, some of them come out crippled, or as you mentioned, with the concussions. It's a bad deal.
So paying athletes could exacerbate the complexities and difficulties of the problems that we already have, unless we go through and really think about where does it fit in, if it fits in at all. And the fact that the momentum of things may be moving in that direction because of purely economic issues, that really doesn't cover the problems of the young people that are really making all this money possible. That's one of the things, this is one of the topics that I hope that the Institute at San Jose State will really be able to get into and bore down into, because it's coming this way and we've got to understand it. There's one other issue with regard to pay that I think is critically important. I want to throw it to you in particular, Chris, but anybody can speak up on it. The WNBA, the average player in the WNBA makes $39,676 a year. The upper end of the salary is $50,000, and this is before taxes. Each team gets about $50,000 for players that don't go overseas or something like that, where they can distribute in the off season, which is basically kind of a aid package for those in the off season who don't go overseas and play for more than 3 months. There's a team, there was an article in yesterday's New York Times of a team of 26 Americans who were over playing in Turkey. And they had gone out to a nightclub after a game, and all of a sudden the club shut down because there was a bombing at another club right up the street that killed 39 people. They're over there principally because they don't make enough money to take care of their families and so forth in the NBA season. So they go over to Europe, they go to Middle East, they go to these places, and this is what we're up against. How legitimate is it for the men of the NBA to stand up and say, some things should not be driven by market forces. Some things should be driven by what's right. Because ultimately, we're looking at a situation where we lose a bunch of these women over there. And everybody's wringing their hands, and of course, our hearts are broken. They're in our prayers. But if we can see this situation for what it is today, is there some place where the men of the NBA, the same men who stand up and say, we've got to do something about these police killings, well, here's one that's already well this side of the political horizon, we should stand up and say something about this?
Well, that's why it's great to have conversations with you and other people to have these discussions. And so first of all, and speaking to you all the time, we always talk, and we talked about this a couple weeks ago, you were saying that, women are always marginalized. So number one, we have to admit that as men, as a society, that really do we care about women's issues as much as we care about our own, even though they're in the same exact, genres with sports. So that would be the first question. Second is, I think we often ask ourselves, well, it's just not popular. Nobody goes to the game. I can't make anybody go to the game. It's not as popular. But third, I think that there needs to be a discussion now on how the league can work together. Honestly, it's never really something that we thought about. And knowing WNBA players, I talk to them all the time. It's unfair. They have to have two careers, one here, one over there. But some would say, well, does the WNBA do a good enough job with advertising? Can they make the game bigger? But I do think that there are definite programs from camps in the summer to organize between both leagues that we can do something. But Doctor, I think that's something that we need to talk about, and I'll go back and talk with them, but it's definitely something we should speak up for when their lives are in trouble just because of their occupation. That's not fair.
Yeah. The first athlete to protest a police killing was a young lady by the name of Ariana Smith from Knox College in Galesburg, Illinois. She literally walked out on the floor during the playing of the national anthem, dropped down on the floor and laid there for 4 minutes and 20 seconds to memorialize the 4 hours and 20 minutes that Mike Brown's body laid in the streets of Ferguson. She was suspended. She lost her position on the basketball team, never played for the team again, in point of fact. But it always seems, whether it's the three women who started the Black Lives Matter hashtag and moved into a movement, whether it's Rosa Parks, whether it's Fannie Lou Hamer, whether it's Angela Davis, women have always been there and up front. And I was just wondering, in this one instance, when it comes to the WNBA, isn't it about time that we stood up and said, this has to change? Let me ask a question about the role of the media. There was a thing at one time about what's said in the locker room stays in the locker room. We just had a situation where an athlete outed his coach after an after-game rant. And that would have been unheard of back in the day. But the social media has changed everything. How much latitude should a team have in terms of First Amendment rights, telling an athlete, you can't use the social media. You don't have a Twitter account if you're in this locker room. The social media has literally changed everything. What does a team do about that? And how far can it go in terms of shutting down Twitter accounts, tweets, and so forth, given the problem that they cause? Is there any area that's legitimate for a team to step up and say, you can't do that. We don't want any Twitters going out this locker room?
I spoke with Coach Kerr, and of course he has one of the best teams in the world, and he's a great coach in my opinion. And I think that the rules have changed. So me personally, I would not like to be in the locker room with anybody that's tweeting, that's showing me and picturing me. We're a family, and we want to keep all of our business inside. And so when I saw that, I couldn't believe that somebody would actually do that, especially with what you talk about other teams and what you say. You don't want to give another team any chalkboard material and that type of thing, but the day has changed. Now when a coach goes into his locker room at halftime, everyone is on his Twitter. And as a captain of the team, I don't think I would have allowed that, but today I think you would be overruled, and I think that we have to understand that it's a tool, it's a powerful tool, and also guys are now going into the game. Remember when we used to play and say, well, don't worry about the first half, don't listen to anything, don't worry about the second half. Well, now, I'm commentating the game. They know what I said about them at halftime. Because people are telling them, Chris said you missed this shot. Or so one, I think it messes with their game because it's too much thinking. But I think that it's just a point of the game that we're going to have to learn how to deal with and work with, because I really think it's here to stay. And when you talk to some of these coaches and they say, their teams need it. This is a part of how they've been raised. This is a part of what they need to do. And I think coaches and teams alike are trying to figure out that discussion, Doctor.
Football, where you have so many guys, Takeo and Anquan, where you have so many guys. Not like basketball, you have 12, 15 guys. You can kind of get around a guy and kind of isolate himself. But where you have 53 guys and probably another 7 or 8 or 9 hanging around on the practice squad or what have you, is there any team responsibility? The guys on the team to let people know, yeah, you have freedom of speech, but you don't send this out, a conversation that's going on in this locker room about somebody or somebody's situation. How does a team in the locker room muster the power and influence to get that done? Because I really don't think under First Amendment, a coach can come in and say, you can't use the internet.
Yeah, I agree. And like Chris said, I think we're dealing with a different era and a different time with the athletes that are in the locker room nowadays. When I first came into the NFL, there's just certain things you just don't do. Plain and simple. I mean, we had codes, and guys were expected to follow those codes. And I think it's the job of the elder guys in the locker room to kind of enforce those policies. I mean, obviously you can't go in and say, don't do this or don't do that or whatever. But I think it's on the older guys to let guys know what is acceptable and what isn't acceptable. For me, and I'm sure for these guys as well, the locker room was a sanctuary. And it's always been that way. What goes on in this locker room, it stays in here. But now with social media and all of the Twitter and Instagram and all of that stuff has changed. And for me, I feel like a dinosaur in the locker room now. Like, just being honest, like, I just finished year 14 and like it's completely different from my rookie year to where it is now. Like, guys will run up to you with Snapchat, hey bro, let's get this, that. And it never used to be that way. Like, so I just feel like there's certain things that should be off limits, like in the locker room. I feel like the locker room should be a sanctuary. I'm not down on social media because I think it's a great platform, especially if you have something positive going on. I think it's a great way to spread a message. I think it's a great way to get involved into your community and things like that. But I think there's limits. And I think because a team can't come and say, no cell phones or no whatever in the locker room, I think it's on the older guys to let guys know what is and what isn't acceptable in the locker room.
And to add to that, I think if anybody of higher authority, when you're inside of that locker room, and if they say, hey, you better not do this, and they're taking away or challenging your First Amendment, that means I'm gonna do it. Because you're telling me what I can't do when I know I have a right to do it. Now, like Anquan said, I played 15 years. My last year was 2012. I had an opportunity to see life before social media. And when social media really came in with the emergence of Facebook, Twitter, and then MySpace and all of that. So I say all of that to say,
They probably don't know what MySpace
MySpace, yeah. I forgot about that one.
I just gave him a great plug. But, no, but, you know, when I look at it overall, it was funny. I was asked this a few days ago. I was walking through the airport, and it was after the game 2 weeks ago when Antonio Brown made the gesture. And I was walking by, and I saw it, and I was like, man, I can't believe he's on, on Facebook Live in the locker room, but I couldn't hear it. And so when somebody asked me about it, I was like, I don't see anything wrong with it. I just thought it was like way after the game. But the next day, after somebody say, Spikes, you really didn't hear it? And so I went back to look it up, and what was wrong was that he did it at a time to where the locker room is a sanctuary and where your head coach, your higher authority, the guy who you're making a run with to be able to play for that championship ring, you put all of that in conflict for your selfish reasons. And so I don't agree with that. I don't say you can't take away social media because the platform is huge. It's tremendous because it allows us to, it really takes out the third party, the media. If I have something to say, I'm going to say it directly, so you can't get it misconstrued, or you can't set it up in a certain way for it to be sold to someone who is looking for something negative. So, you know, from that social media aspect, I think it's the responsibility not only of that player, but of older guys in the locker room who understand what winning culture is about. And then you also have to have people of higher authority that those players respect to be able to convey that message to them so they understand how important it is. Because I think Antonio Brown, he could have came across and got across his message with Facebook Live, but maybe just at a little later time still in the locker room to where guys are half naked, where your coach is talking in the background about your opponent coming up the next week. And so those are my thoughts on it.
You look at all of the complexities that we're dealing with now in this modern sports era, and I mean, I have to wonder why anybody would want to be a coach. But the reality is that despite all of the progress that has been made, and as I mentioned to Jim earlier, progress is one of those concepts like profit. At some point, it comes down to who's keeping the books, and all the progress that has been made. We look at some areas that are worrying. If we look at Major League Baseball in 1973, 21% of the league was African American. Now it's less than 8%, and it's dropping. We've lost tremendous ground there. If we look at the heavyweight championship, the heavyweight division of boxing. I mean, I remember the time, and I'm quite certain Kareem and Jim, when we had Muhammad Ali, we had Smoking Joe Frazier, Floyd Patterson, Big Cat Cleveland Williams, Ernie Shavers, most certainly Archie Moore. We had all of those great boxers, Sonny Liston, and when you name the names, you can literally put a face on them. Today, you couldn't find 10 people out of 100 who could tell you if there was a heavyweight contender that's African American. And if you name somebody, they couldn't put a face on him. We've lost ground in that regard. But even where we appear to be holding our own, we find that there are dynamics going on that are worrisome. If we look at coaches, black coaches, they tend to have a shorter period of tenure than white coaches. They tend to be in the most difficult situations, which means that the chances of them being successful are slimmer. Or do the athletes today, with all the power and leverage that we admit to, have an obligation to speak to that issue? We have the Rooney Rule, Jim. I'm not sure what that really means in terms of the numbers, the actual impact of diversification in coaching. Do athletes have a responsibility to step up and stand up and say, hey, we've got to change. We've got to be better than this?
Oh, are you talking to me?
Of course I am. You advise people at
Somebody
Cleveland
else.
just like I'm sitting up at the 49ers and have this conversation all the time.
Well, Professor, you posed something that is very complicated. Because when you talked about the lack of African-American baseball players now compared to the past and so forth and so on, if you look at the National Football League, what do you have? The dominance by African-American athletes. If you look at the NBA, what do you have? Now, what you don't have is ownership, that power seat, that exclusive group of individuals who oversee everything else. And when I talked about education, I was talking about education because there's a dignity there. Sometimes when you're playing football and basketball and singing and dancing, it reminds me of the old stereotypes of the past, where we were always portrayed in a particular way. So as a culture, I don't think that we have concentrated on the right things. That's why I emphasize education. We don't use the power that we have to get into the power positions. And so we sit back and we say that someone else should deliver equality by hiring a number of black coaches. Well, we want to be in a situation where you hire the best. So we as a culture have a responsibility, and particularly those who have money and influence, to bring our own communities up, our own education level up, to a point where we can participate on every level. The kind of money that the athletes make today, if they were a collective group, they could buy an NFL team or a basketball team. So basically all I'm saying is I am not a victim of anything. For me to sit here and for my wife and I to claim that we don't live a great life in this country would be criminal. So what we have done is have tried to take advantage of a democratic system that might be a little more difficult for us, but if we try harder, as we did, we could live a pretty decent life, more so than any country in the world. So what I'm saying is that sometimes you have to look at your own culture and what your culture do collectively to become a greater part of the decision-making process in our society. And I don't want to be trying to play up to anyone, but if I have to give an example of what I mean, and you want to go study it, you look at the Jewish community and look at the principles that they apply and look at the power that they have.
At the end of the day, we are confronted with the constant image of fluctuating numbers of people in leadership and other positions, even in sports, and an increasing number of players on the field making the money in revenue-producing sports, basketball and football in particular. With regard to football, we're looking at this concussion issue. And more than any other question that I've gotten from parents as I moved around was, what do I say to young people about the concussion issue? And I guess, Takeo, I would ask you and Anquan, I mean, you're Jim, about this concussion thing, which is not going to go away. What do we say to young people about that? What do we tell? I mean, when you have Hall of Famers who are saying, my son can't play football, where we had a president of the United States saying, if I had a son, he couldn't play football. What do we say to those poor people from the lower end of the socioeconomic ladder whose sons are playing football and they say, this is how we're going to move? Well, what do you tell them?
I think the first thing is understanding the position that I played started playing football at the age of 7. And I retired at the age of 36. So 29 years out of my life, I was playing the game of football. And so I understand the question to me is, if you had to do it all over again, would you do it knowing some of the circumstances or whatever, what may have you comes out of it? I can honestly say I'm afraid because I don't know and there's not enough research or there's not enough factual stuff in the studies that will definitely say, boom, this is it by concrete time limit. And so for me, when I look at it and add all of that up, if I had to do it all over again, I would do it all over again. It's because I love the game, and until something actually, I mean, I know you're gonna get damaged from playing this game. I'm sitting right here and my back is killing me right now. You know, so I'm not trying to act numb to the situation, but I'm just saying the game of football, bottom line, it has provided me and my family so much, so many opportunities. It's given me this grand stage to sit up here with you distinguished gentlemen. And it's not even about the money, because when you look at it from when we all played from little youngsters, I never knew they got paid. I didn't even care if they got paid. I played because I loved the game. And so maybe in 15, 20 years, we sit on the panel again and I have another ache, then maybe my answer would be different depending on the research that comes out. But right now, I can honestly say, would I allow my son to play? I don't have one yet, but would I? I would, but I wouldn't push him to the game of football for the first sport. You know, it would be something, basketball, baseball, to where you don't have to put yourself at high risk.
You know, anytime you play a game, anytime you are in the business, whereby regulation they have to pull up 2 ambulances at the job site 2 hours before you even come to work, you're in a weird business. And by regulation, they have to have 2 ambulances at the stadium before every NFL game, 2 hours before the game. But we know that going in. And I would ask you the same question, Anquan. You're about as tough and I put you in, as I said, in the same category with Jim and some of the other guys that come through just in terms of toughness. But how do we answer the questions, the increasing queries, which are not going to go away, about the risks involved in football? It's a great sport. I love it. I love everybody I've ever met in it. I played it myself. But what do we say now, given what we know?
Well, this is a discussion that goes on in my house. Because I have a 12-year-old. We have 2 boys, me and my wife. Our oldest son is 12, and our youngest is 6. Our youngest could care less about football. My oldest son, he grew up around the sport of football. I've been fortunate enough to, every team that I've been on has more than welcomed me having my son around. So my son goes to work with me. When I was in Baltimore, he was my roommate for training camp. So he's always around the facilities. People in the facility know him by name. But I'm conflicted with, should I let him play football or should I not? And up until this point, he's only played flag football. Number one, I don't trust some of these youth league coaches. Where I'm from, youth league football is big business. And I don't know if you guys have saw it or not, but like just down the street in Miami, they were betting tens of hundreds of thousands of dollars on youth football, which is absurd. I think youth football should be football at its purest form, to where guys play the game because they actually love playing the game. But you have some people who've just perverted that. And then you see this one kid who's just more physically mature than the rest of the kids, and you got these coaches just letting him, watch this. And he just killing these kids, man. So for me, I don't trust these coaches, these youth league coaches. And I've had some rough injuries in my career. I've torn my ACL, I've broken my nose. I actually have 6 plates and 40 screws in my face right now because I had sinus fractures, but ended up coming back 2 weeks later to play. But I've gone through a lot of things in my NFL career. Fortunate enough for me, I've only had 1 concussion. But I look at where I come from and where I am now, the opportunities that have been afforded to me by the game of football, the lives that I've been able to touch and change through football that I know, like, had it not been for football, I wouldn't know half of the people that I know now. I wouldn't have the influence that I have now. So I'm conflicted because I know there's a great side of football, but I also know there's a dangerous side of football as well, with the injuries and all of the concussions and all of the other stuff that comes with it. But my wife posed a question to me that really made me, like, think. She said, you know, we tell our boys that you can be anything that you want to be. That, you know, if you want to be the president, you can be that. If you want to be an NFL player, you can be that. You want to be a doctor. And that's always been the American way. You know, dream it, work towards it, and you can achieve it. So she's told me, like, how would it look if the one guy that my son really looked up to, the guy that he wanted to emulate, the guy that he wanted to be like, can we tell him you can't be like him? Because my son looks to me like his superhero. Everything I do, he wants to do. He comes in, Dad, can I go to practice with you in the morning? I'm like, yeah, son, you can go, but you got to go to bed by this time. No problem. He's in the bed. When I wake up in the morning, he's up. He's ready to go, and I have to be to work 6 o'clock. But he's ready to go because he loves being around that atmosphere. He loves everything that his dad does. You know, he works out with me. Everything. He looks up to me. So how can I tell him, you can't be like me?
It's tough. A lot of parents are dealing with that very thing. And the point that you make about have your dreams, work at them, and so forth, you know, the only thing that I would add to that is that we have to teach our young people to dream with their eyes open. Know what the situation is and be honest with them about that. They can handle the truth. What they can't handle is the myths. So we need to teach them to learn to dream with their eyes open. Not deprive them of their dreams, but learn to dream with their eyes open. And I think that the point that you're making is a valid one. Kareem and Chris Smith, I don't want to leave you guys out because I know people think that football is tough. But yeah, I mean, like you used to say, Kareem, if you got to drag a 300-pound guy up and down the floor for 3 hours like Bob Lanier 4 or 5 times a week, you know, say there's a wear and tear on the bodies. And I think that people should understand that if you're participating in a sport at the highest level, even I don't know of a sprinter who ain't got some knees, you know, or lower back. Basketball players with knees, lower back. I mean, so there's a price to be paid. And I would like to have your sense of how much of an emphasis, while we're blowing these kids up and saying, you can do this, what a wonderful thing, taking advantage of them sometime in terms of these youth leagues and so forth, are we doing enough in terms of telling them the truth about the price to be paid?
I think a common sense approach really would be the best thing to apply to this situation, because, you know, a sport like basketball, it's not going to hurt your kid. You know, he might sprain an ankle or something, or he might catch an elbow. Very rare. So, you know, sports like that, you don't have to worry as much as a dangerous sport like football. Football is even harder on the athletes than this mixed martial arts. those guys don't get hurt much, because they can step out and say, hey, I can't go any further. And the culture of football is you got to be hard, you got to be tough, you got to take it. Well, you almost had a concussion, but you knocked the other guy out. That one-upmanship escalates to a point where people are getting really damaged by it. And I knew Junior Seau, man. When he killed himself, that ripped me up, man. And what's going on? We shouldn't be losing guys like that. So a common sense approach really has to be common. What you said about dreaming with your eyes open. You don't want to. People who climb mountains without ropes. A lot of those guys fall down and die. So. Just think about what you're doing and the price that's going to be paid. Of course, I had my son, my middle son, he was playing football. And he decided he didn't like it. He broke his finger playing Pop Warner. I didn't like it. He didn't like it. He stopped. Now he's a surgeon now. So he's on the other side of it, But a lot of kids don't get that guidance. And a lot of kids end up on they fall through the cracks for that reason. So we just have to value them and just tell them that their health long term is a lot more important than playing football. And you got to make that choice. As a parent, you have to make that choice as you educate your kids. But let them know what's going on and let them know about the NC2A because you don't want them to be exploited. And that's the big issue, I think.
Yeah, huge, as somebody would say, huge. Yeah.
I'm encouraged by being up here and then again hearing Mr. Brown talk about not being a victim. And my father, the old story, grew up on a plantation, big cotton, brought his 10 brothers and sisters to Detroit, worked at an auto factory, and I admired him like your son admires you. So I would see my father working and fixing something or working on a car and see his work ethic. And so what I take out of that is the best tenets of sports translates to all of you. The best writers in here, the best professors, it's because you get up, you work early, you work harder than anyone else, you find your passion, you love what you do, So what I would hope is that we take the best tenets of sports and to teach those to our kids. When I read an article by Kareem, I know it's the same process of the man with the best shot ever. When I hear Mr. Brown talk, I know that he uses the same consideration that he did when he was making sacrifices for us during his playing days. And so for me personal, more than concussions, more than the sport, I hope that the kids will see the attention to detail, the excellence you put in getting there and working hard. And then if they follow Anquan Bolden, star football player and his work ethic, I can translate to anything. I could be a doctor. I can do anything I want because it's all about the hard work. And so hopefully
that's, we hear Donnie Hathaway in the background calling this to an end, calling us home. So I want to thank all of you, the great Mr. Jim Brown, Cale Spikes, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Mr. Chris Webb, I love you, my brother, Anquan Bolden, Tommy Smith, and thank you all for coming to this program. Thank you very much.
First question is going to Janie, and I'm going to ask each reporter to provide their name and their affiliation. Okay, here we go.
Janie McCauley from the Associated Press. Thanks, guys. Jim, with the divisiveness you saw in the 60s, what real strategies can you give some of the athletes of today that can work when so many people are fearing this presidency? And maybe Anquan could touch on this as well as a player and how you work on this with your team.
Well, Andrea, since you're the youngest,
I think we are in a period where this country is divided. I think anybody that says otherwise is fooling themselves. But I do think in order for us to be successful, at some point we have to come together. You might not like the other person, or you might not like what they stand for, or whatever it is. Because I was asked a question. We have a trip planned to DC this coming spring, and I was asked the question, if you were invited to the White House, would you meet with President-elect Trump, President Trump? And my answer was yes. I mean, at this point, in order for anything to be changed, I mean, you have to sit down and talk with President Trump. I mean, at this point, the Republicans, they're in control of the House, they're in control of Congress. So in order for anything or any change to come about, you have to meet with the powers to be. And you have to sit down and explain exactly where you're coming from, but also you have to be willing to listen. And I think that's one of the things that's hindering us as a country now. Nobody listens to each other no more. It's, this is what I want, and it needs to go this way. Forget how you feel or what you think. But in order for any progress to be made, I mean, there has to be communication between both parts. Ideas have to be explained, and there has to be listening ears as well.
Thank you.
In summary.
I'm very optimistic, and I can demonstrate that very easily. You see this group that's here, we're all together. We're here for a purpose. San Jose, my friend here, the professor, we're honoring and respecting the fact that they invited us here. We really do not have any differences. We all are looking for America to be as great a country as it can be. My particular work with my wife is to deal with those like-minded people across the country, headed up by Ray Lewis, who I passed the torch to, Curtis Martin, and many other athletes that are going to do the best that they can do based on 3 areas. One would be the eradication of the violence in these neighborhoods around the country, which I have not heard anybody talk about. The other is about jobs for people that really need jobs, and the job training that has to happen, and the education that can take place in the schools and in these communities, also in the prisons. It's called life management skills. That is the education that American puts forth. So we're an action group, and we're a group that can appreciate the fact that this was put together, and this is nothing but harmony and the ability for all of us to search for a way to work together to make a change for those who are less fortunate than we are.
All right, our next question is for sure if I
Scott Osler, San Francisco Chronicle. Jim, this is to you again. Now that you have the voice and attention and apparently the respect of the president, do you expect to use that in an ongoing basis? And if so, what kind of things do you think you could convey to the president?
Did you hear what he said? I'm going to convey something to the president. But you're right. I am going to convey something. I have conveyed something to him, and I have called his attention to the minorities in this country and the fact that we have forces out there that will work with his administration to make a better life for these minorities. And as I said, Ray Lewis is my lead guy, and we have been really accepted with great respect by the president and a lot of people on his staff. So we are optimistic, and as I said to everybody, I don't play quarterback. I'm just a running back. So I don't have the answer to everything. But those 3 things we know that it will affect the people that need to be affected. And that's what I believe that this president will back us up in.
Hi there, this is Phil Barber from the Santa Rosa Press-Democrat, and I have a question for Anquan and for Takeo. Several NBA coaches, Greg Popovich, Steve Kerr, Stan Van Gundy, have been very eloquent and passionate about the Trump administration and what that might mean for women, for people of color, for the LGBT community. Pretty much radio silence from the NFL, and from NFL coaches anyway. And I'm wondering, does that bother you at all? And is any explanation for why we don't hear a little bit more social consciousness from the NFL?
I mean, I can't answer for NFL coaches as to why they haven't weighed in on different topics. But my hat goes off to, you know, I've heard Coach Popovich speak, and like you said, he did an eloquent job. So my thing is, it's not about criticizing those who don't speak out. It's about using my voice. So, I mean, I can't justify someone else's actions or, you know, condemn them for what they do or don't do. Only thing I can do is do my part, and that's the role that I play.
I agree with Anquan when he talks about you can't condemn or criticize anyone who doesn't want to be part of the movement in the light, and that's okay. But what I don't agree with is I think any time that you want to have progress or if you want to make change, you have to let your side, as far as where you're standing, you need to be clear on that side and be able to attach to someone, as these gentlemen and the ladies here, make your point be known, exactly what side of the fence that you're standing on. And I'll be honest with you, it's hard to get up here and be able to do this. These seats are not for everybody. That's why I understand it's a privilege and an honor to be up here amongst these guys. But at the end of the day, like I said earlier, you can be honest when you can't be right. And I've always known anytime that you want to make change, you have to be proactive. And it's okay being silent, but you have to attach yourself and make sure you have a plan and say, you know what, this is the side of the fence that we're on, and this is how we're going to support it. And that's my stance in it when I look at it from the NFL side.
Can I, let me say something. I'm probably the only person up here who has visited a number of NFL teams, from the Detroit Lions to the Seattle Seahawks. I've dealt with the Miami Dolphins and so forth, and we're talking apples and oranges when we're talking NBA and NFL. NBA, you have maybe 15 guys, probably all but 2 or 3 guys are African Americans. If you're on a team like San Antonio, everybody, I mean, it looks like the new United Nations, virtually everybody is from somewhere else. And so it doesn't become, the issue is either a settled issue for all practical purposes because of the ethnicity and the orientation of the guys on the team who are oftentimes already speaking out in the NBA, or it's like Major League Baseball, where you have 26% of the guys being overwhelmingly Latino, and the rest, for all practical purposes, being white or something else, on less than 8% black. So you don't find baseball managers speaking out. In the NFL, you have 53 guys. And some other guys hanging around. A lot of those 53 guys are central figures, such as quarterback Tom Brady, Manning, and so forth. They have dispositions oftentimes that are not the same as the activist athletes, the Colin Kaepernicks. A coach under those circumstances runs a tremendous risk if he does not manage that situation properly. If you look at what the 49ers did under Jed York in terms of managing the Kaepernick situation, if you look at how Pete Carroll is handling that situation, or how the Miami Dolphins are handling that situation, or how the Detroit Lions are trying to approach the management of that situation, it's an entirely different management situation because of the number and diversity of guys and guys in certain key positions. So you really can't look at the NFL and the NBA in the same way. And I would also say that of the guys who are speaking out, you have white guys who are speaking out. The black coaches in the NFL aren't speaking out. You look at the NBA, I mean, where's the overwhelming number of black coaches who are standing up and saying, hey, you know, this situation is intolerable. So we have to look at it and analyze it, break it down to its fine points, and then try to understand the dynamics that are driving each one of these situations, and not why certain people aren't speaking out, but what is it that is moving those who are speaking out to do so, and how do we get a better understanding of that situation and moving ahead with it.
Good afternoon. Jesse Gary from Channel 2 here in the Bay Area. Listening to what a lot of you have said this morning and into the afternoon, it's apparent that we have a cultural value shift. And I'm kind of going to bring up something that Mr. Bolden mentioned about players broadcasting from the locker room when that's used to be a sanctuary. How or can sports be used as a type of fulcrum to try and reverse or influence that change in a different direction, where we have more of a coming together and less of a balkanization of the culture? It seems that everyone's going to their own corner, whether it's, and it cuts across all political lines, racial lines, economic lines. People are going this way as opposed to this way. How, or what is the mechanism for using sports to reverse that? And if we could start with Miss Danielle, maybe we could kick it off there and just get opinions on how and what that looks like.
I mean, I think for me, the thing, as Anquan mentioned, is to talk to each other and to listen to each other. In the context of, you know, the reality, especially for men's sports, there is a large platform, and there are a lot of eyeballs. And so there's an incredible amount of power in that. I think for me, we don't listen enough, and I think each person can take it upon themselves to really try to do that. I know that, you know, regardless of whether or not I agree with the results or, you know, are in favor of the results of this election, what I do know is that there is a large portion of this country that felt that their voice was not heard for whatever reason. And I don't fully understand that because I haven't lived that experience, but as a minority and as a woman, I know what it's like to not have my voice heard, and to try to find that common ground, whether it's across sports, whether it's across gender, whether it's across political, economic lines. I feel like sports is that environment because there's such a platform to start that conversation and start that listening.
There are economics, there are communication silos that actually amount to a balkanization of the media, even the social media. There are people who go to certain certain websites alone, certain networks and certain networks alone. I mean, you either an MSNBC person or CNN person or Fox News person. There's a natural balkanization that takes place with regard to sports. If you are a fan of the Patriots, if you are a fan of the 49ers, you are automatically somewhat siloed off. And what happens on that team, what you agree with on that team, you're likely to give a lot more latitude to that team in terms of mistakes on the field, off the field, errors. I mean, 3-game suspension for Brady. Hey, that's not on Brady or the Patriots. Hey, that's the commissioner's issue. Other people are saying, hey, how can he get MVP when he's been suspended for 3 games for violating rules and so forth and so on. And so there's a natural balkanization that takes place in sport that limits the capacity of an athlete to really speak to a tremendously broad audience. He can have an audience because there are large numbers of people who don't even care about sports one way or the other. But there's a natural balkanization that kind of limits and bounds it in much the same sense that you have this silo effect in the media. The more media we get, the more siloed people become, where they're just not listening to what they don't want to hear. And athletes tend to be treated the same way. There's a tremendous amount of power and leverage there to get a message out, but the chances are very good that the athletes are not going to be the answer because of the very character of what they are involved in, and the fan base that that has allegiance to them, and some that hate their guts.
What I'd actually just add to that also on the local level, however, I'm Jocelyn Benson, the CEO of RISE, and we did an event in Detroit where you could not get community leaders and law enforcement in the room, but when the Pistons stepped up and said, we're going to serve as mediators, would like to develop solutions for our community, they got people to the table. The athletes got people to come to the table and develop solutions when no one else could. And I think that's also what you see with Anquan and his leadership on Capitol Hill. So I do think, to a certain extent, athletes can have a unique role to bring people together to develop solutions where few other people can.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's what you can do in that community. So what we're looking at here is not athletes throwing up their hands and say we can't have an impact, but within our region, within our fandom, within our community base, we can have a phenomenal impact in bringing police and community people together when they won't even listen to anybody else.
Hey, Harry, we have time for 1 or 2 questions more. Is that okay?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay,
yeah,
excellent.
Good. And I'll shut up.
We have a student reporter here from San Jose State.
Andres Magallanes for El Espartano Noticias. This is for all the student athletes on the table. Seeing how many of the student athletes, you guys were talking about on the panel of NCAA exploding students. How would you guys find a way, because many of them are of color, how would you find a way for them to not be exploited? And would you consider student athletes today the modern day indentured servants?
Well, hopefully we can be a galvanizing force for those athletes. I think that the conversation is above our, I think that the conversation has to be had nationally amongst the NCAA and amongst students as far as what changes could be made. I think there could be very small changes in the beginning, from putting certain amounts of escrow away that the school has profited and putting that into healthcare and other things for students once they graduate that are still going to be experiencing these problems. Or maybe even it's a guy that is allowed to go back and get his education after he's torn his ACL and can no longer help the school anymore. You can't get your education that way. You still won't get a scholarship. And so I think number one is to have a discussion, to bring awareness, and to let some of the kids know the situation that they're in. When I was in school, I didn't know the situation that I was in, and so I think part of us teaming up with Dr. Edwards is, first of all, to make sure that we consolidate our voice and to let everyone know what the issues are. And I think that this is something for us, but I also think it's something for the students today to work out. They have many different issues than I had growing up, many different concerns that they need to be met, but there needs to be, and hopefully together, because if not, you can see 10, 15 years maybe amateur athletics being wiped out because of business and someone monetarily taking advantage of the situation and recruiting and saying we can't pay you. But being a big fan of college sports, I just hope that there is a conversation that can be had before there needs to be one. But right now our voice, I believe, is to combine our voices and hopefully to let the students know what type of situations they're in so they can open their minds, think about it, and then we can address it together.
I want to be able to add to that is understanding collectively when you bring these voices together to mentor these young athletes, because as Dr. Harry Edwards stated, a lot of these kids, they probably won't even play in these big bowl games due to the fact that they know a bigger payoff as far as how they can provide for their families is the next step ahead. And so just to expand more on it, I think the schools, NCAA, from the profits that they have received and that they are receiving, I think it really starts within that school looking to go back and get some of the guys who have experienced certain things, whether or not it's success going from the college level to the professional level, even from the guys who went to that from the college to the pros, may have a horror story, it's being broke. But if you can provide these athletes, these student athletes, the opportunities to get the, not information, but the right information to where they can relate to. Because a lot of times we've all sat in the seats when you're at school and they're giving you the information what they want you to have. but it's all about the right information that's coming from somebody who can not only validate it, but who also lived that life.
If I may, oh, I'm sorry, you have a question?
No, please go ahead.
Yes, I'm a little confused because we're identified as athletes up here, and that's not bad. But the issues that this country faces today is not about athletes. If I would say it's great for these youngsters to be here and to talk about their voice. But in 1968, the Black Economic Union called a meeting of the top black athletes in the country, and we had an issue based upon Muhammad Ali refusing to go into the service. And the question was being a conscientious objector. And Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who couldn't be here, was one of those individuals. Bill Russell was another, etc. And we were not dealing with just having a voice. We were dealing with action. And so I come from an era of action. So when we talk about having a voice, it's like Serena Williams says she's finally now going to speak up. The speaking up is not going to do it. It's the programmatic political approach that we have to take as a body. Now, what I would conclude the statement on is that as athletes and American citizens, we have a popularity situation and we have an economic situation. Athletes have money and they have influence. So if we just talk about the athletic contribution, then you build a national fund so that you can have independent resources to launch the programs that you want to have. If you want to use your influence, let's use it in these black communities where the homicide rate is unbelievable and nobody is talking about that. So the point is to identify goals and pursue those goals and use the tools that we were given that other people don't have to make us successful in those goals.
All right, we have one last question.
Hi, I'm Olivia, and I'm from the game last night. Thank you all for making yourselves available to us. I have a question for Ms. Benson. I'm wondering what inspired this organization RISE into existence, and how will you be measuring success moving forward?
RISE is a collaboration of every sports league and media network in the country. So the heads and the commissioners of every league are on our board. It was started by Stephen Ross, the owner of the Miami Dolphins. And what we seek to do is amplify athletes who are speaking out and provide them with information and support to ensure that their work has an impact. And I often say our metrics for success range not just from athletes that we work with and the student athletes that we touch, but we want to see real change happen as a result. We want to see criminal justice reform. We want to see education equality promoted, and we want to see athletes leading the way to bring people together to promote solutions. And we want to see safer communities as a result of law enforcement and kids coming together to build relationships, working with athletes to do so. So we want to see real change, and we want to see success led by athletes and the sports industry.
All right, folks, and with that question, we are out of time. Thank you so much for being with us all morning and into the afternoon. Our panelists have flights to catch and appointments to make and lunch to eat, so we're going to let them go now. Thank you very much.
Thank you.